Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com. Promo code STAPLE20.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah! 97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Josh Hennig here at Happy Hour Friday alongside Nick Earnshaw on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. It's a Happy Hour Friday. Mike Gill is on his way back from Virginia. He'll be back on Monday, but until then, you got 4 hours of me and the man known for the Nuggets, Nick Earnshaw. How are you doing?
What's going on, Josh? Nice to see you. What a start to the show. A little stone cold Happy Hour Friday.
A little
Love
glass
to see
shatters on your day, you know.
Yeah, it goes with our tweet out on the X platform.
Yeah.
Today.
Well, you know, we both are learning things today. So I learned today that you can direct a tweet without screenshotting it to Instagram. And you learned today that this is actually a Disturbed song.
Yes. So 2 different kind of topics here we're learning about. You're learning technology. I'm learning a little history today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got a lot to get to today on the show. Busy show coming up today. Mike Beguer, the press of Atlantic City, is back coming up in about 20 minutes from now. John McMullen, of course, Jacob Media Sports Birds 365. He'll be joining us at 3 p.m. today. Adam Kaplan, Football and Forward, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And Frank Close will join us on a Happy Hour Friday to get into the Phillies. Because I understand, Nick Earnshaw, last night was Eagles preseason game 2. I get that. But let's be realistic. Most people who had half a brain realized that the starters were not playing for the Eagles last night. So the majority of us prioritized the Phillies over the Eagles last night, and they just caught up on the Eagles later in the night. And I'm so glad we did, because the Phillies have started to find their offense. And it goes back to Wednesday, Nick Earnshaw, when I had Matt Gill from The Athletic on. He said, this team needs somebody to hit a home run to get them back in the saddle again. Ever since Kyle Schwarber hit that home run, that big grand slam, and the bank lost their minds. It was so loud, Nick Earnshaw felt the vibrations down the street at the center when he was at that concert for, was it Future and who else?
Metro Boomin.
So, you're at the concert. Ever since that moment, the Phillies have looked like the Phillies again.
They have. And the Schwarber slam that saved the season, Josh, that's what it's going to be known as, okay? They come back, they have that team meeting that, you couldn't really talk about. Rob Thompson didn't really want to talk about, right? The players only meeting that was reported. Ever since then, Turner gets a day off. He comes back firing on all cylinders. Last night, your boy, Josh Hennig,
my boy,
Weston Wilson with the cycle, the 10th one in Philadelphia Phillies history. The first one at
by
Citizens.
A rookie.
Yeah, first one by a rookie. First one since David Bell at Citizens Bank Park. Last one was JT Realmuto. What a night last night. I mean, this is what we talked about, last week and on Monday as well throughout the Nuggets too. Like, the Marlins and the Nationals are the perfect 2 teams to jumpstart your offense again. They're bad teams. They're bad baseball teams. They don't pitch very well. They don't do a lot of things very well. And you're at home. This is the time to get back to what you've been doing all season long, is hitting home runs, hitting the baseball, getting on base, pitching well, getting 6-7 innings out of your starters. That's what the Phillies have done so far in the last 2 nights. It feels like they have had a reawakening, Josh.
I think they have, and I understand there are the contingent of people out there who are saying it's just the Nationals, it's just the Marlins, But then we would be complaining if they don't beat the Nationals and Marlins, right, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, they lost the first game to the Marlins 5-0. It wasn't pretty on Tuesday night. And then after the next two nights, you've had an offensive outburst and explosion. Like, when you're going through a rut in the baseball season, okay, you need to play some bad teams maybe to get you back to where you were, right?
Yep.
Like, you're on the West Coast, not fun playing the Diamondbacks, Dodgers, and Mariners. Three really good teams.
Although you did beat the Dodgers 2 out of 3.
You did, but still, not fun teams you want to play. They're really good. And you're still continuing to struggle against the Diamondbacks. You come back home and you're able to play bad teams, and that's when you can kind of figure things out again. It's like, okay, we have a 6-game homestand. We're playing against some division rivals who have had a bad season, traded everyone, Miami did, and the Nationals, they're nowhere to be found for the next couple of years anyway. So this is the time to do it. And you know, it's the spot in the season where you're going to start heading into September. You know, the roster is going to expand. You're getting ready for the postseason, and you're getting some guys back off the injured list. This is the time to start heating up again because you're going to have a tough schedule. You have a lot of road games coming up. You have to take care of business when you're at home. And the past 2 nights, that's exactly what they've done.
And I think that, as I said before, this team is starting to look like themselves again. And I tend to believe that the team that won 6 games for the All-Star break is not a fluke.
No.
Now, do I think some of the performances by individual players is a little fluky? Yes. But Nick Earnshaw, 20 minutes before we even came on the radio, we had people texting in at 609-403-0973. And I gotta say, Nick, I'm proud of these people. I'm proud of Charlie from Violin. You know why? Because yesterday I heard from none of the haters, none of the anti-Phillies people, none of the Rob Thompson needs to be fired people, none of the people who were angry earlier in the week.
Oh, it was crickets yesterday, huh?
You know, and I gotta give Charlie from Violin credit because he took the opposite approach. He said, Josh, please fire off on the fans that gave up on the Phillies since returning from London. Phillies getting hot at the right time before a rough road trip. Charlie and Violin, I am gonna fire off on the people who gave up on the Phillies. And I'm not gonna name names, but I am gonna say that there are people who regularly text 97.3 ESPN at 609-403-0973 and your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. There are people who have chimed in regularly who treated the losing month of July as an opportunity to throw eggs at a glass house. That's basically what happened. There were people who were so intent to throw the Phillies under the bus because of one rough month. When literally, we have documented right here on 97.3 ESPN, myself, Nick Earnshaw, Mike Gill, we have all documented, maybe not Billy Schwein because Billy's an emotional individual.
Yes.
You know, those of us who have rational mind and rational being have documented the 2008, the 2009, the 2022 Phillies, they all had bad months, losing streaks. Nick Earnshaw, did you know that the 2022 Phillies had 3 5-game losing streaks?
I didn't know it was 3, but I did know. I remember September being so frustrating. I mean, does anyone remember that? Right before the postseason?
Yeah.
It was an extremely frustrating team. I would get sick and tired of watching them and get so upset. So, yeah, I was aware they had some struggles during that year, Josh. That I did know.
Yeah, so, I mean, but people looked at the 2024 Phillies in a vacuum and said, this is what problem, this is... without looking at the fact that every team goes through struggles. Every team goes through downturns. Every team has a tough go of it. And that's why I love when Kyle Schwarber said the other day about how he said, we're not worried, we're just frustrated. You know, he said that, you know, we're frustrated because we've been through this before. We know that we can overcome this. But he said they were frustrated, not worried. And it was the day after he said that he hit the grand slam. And now 2 days later, Weston Wilson comes off the bench, plays for Brandon Marsh because you got 3 straight days of left-handed pitchers. And I gotta tell you, Nick Earnshaw, the Phillies are back. And you know what? Weston Wilson needs to start tonight and he needs to start tomorrow. Because guess what? Tonight is Patrick Corbin. Tomorrow is Mackenzie Gore. And you know what? Weston Wilson might be the best right-handed bat on the team right now.
Yeah, I mean, hitting for the cycle last night was absolutely amazing. And I'm sitting there in that last at bat. I'm like, come on, he's got to get it. And it goes off the right fielder's glove. It was a great moment for Weston Wilson. But yeah, I mean, this is a discussion to have right now because he's hitting fantastic against left-handed pitching. I mean, over 400 here with the Philadelphia Phillies this year against left-handers. And it just makes you wonder, Josh. Like, man, Austin Hayes is hurt right now. And you got to ride the hot hand. You know me, I'm big on riding the hot hand, Josh. That's my MO. I love riding the hot hand when it's guys like Wilson, Turnbull. Utilize them when they're at their best. Have him start over the next few games. Because if he's going to give you really good at-bats against left-handed pitching, there's no reason he shouldn't be in the lineup. I mean, the guy's been unbelievable, and it's against the Nationals. Let him hit. Get the most out of Weston Wilson while you can, because we know, just like the Phillies, losing all these games and going through this rut and this tough stretch over the past month or so, it's gonna end at some point. Ride Weston Wilson until you can ride him no more, okay? Let him hit the crap out of the baseball. Just do it. Just let him be Weston Wilson for now. And if he's going to give you a lot offensively, when you don't have guys like Austin Hayes in the lineup, you don't really have anyone after that, I think Wilson should start the rest of the week and the rest of the series. No doubt. Even against right-handers. He's ticked up a little bit against right-handers. Not as great as against lefties, obviously, but I want to see him get more at-bats.
Listen, to me, I think that this team needs to be more concerned about winning baseball games than worry about people's feelings.
Yes.
Okay? And I think that if you care about winning baseball games, you're not asking Brandon Marsh right now to go hit against Patrick Corbin for as bad as he is, or Mackenzie Gore.
Josh, the Phillies have 30 hits in the past 2 games. 30. I mean, where has this been? I mean, it's been a while. 30 hits in the past 2 games. They scored 13 last night. The night before they scored 9, 22 total runs. The offense has come alive, and this is the type of spark that can enhance a team going forward. And when you have, a lot of road games coming up, like I mentioned, Weston Wilson's hitting. When all these guys are hitting, they feed off of each other. They build off of each other. Those at-bats build off one another. And leave Weston Wilson in there. I mean, when you see a guy, a rookie, who's still considered a rookie, to hit for the cycle, that doesn't happen very often. Leave him in the lineup, let him rock, because he's been amazing so far. He's had really good at-bats, and he's mashing the baseball. And you need guys that can mash the baseball right now, Josh Henning.
You do. And I think what's interesting is that, as I said, I give Charlie credit because him texting in at 609-403-0973, he's not the only one. We'll get to David and Violin in just a minute. But, this is part of baseball, Nick Earnshaw.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball is a sport of failure. Baseball is a sport of being a loser more often than a winner.
Yep.
It's just the nature of the game.
That's how it goes.
The best players in the Hall of Fame only get hits 30% of the time.
Right.
So it's like literally you're congratulating somebody for being below average in any other business in life. But in baseball, that's really good. So we forget that because baseball is a sport of losing, that when teams go through losing streaks, it's just part of the equation.
It's just baseball, okay? It's just baseball. That happens. It's a long season. That's what we've talked about, Josh. Like, it's a long season. And remember, on Monday, on Friday, last week, we talked about the Yankees were not great in their past 40 games. The Dodgers, the Braves. It wasn't just the Phillies who were struggling. All of the good teams in Major League Baseball have gone through ruts this season. It's just how it goes. And, people were freaking out because they're not at the level they were at the beginning of the season. They took it down a notch. What was this team on pace to win? Like 115 games or something like that at some point? Like, it was ridiculous. That's not going to happen. That's not realistic. It's a long season. You're going to battle injuries. Things are going to happen. And it's not to say you can't critique what's going on and critique some decisions by Rob Thompson, critique what's going on with Bryce Harper, Trey Turner. They're struggling at the plate. That's fine. That's fair. I mean, it's part of the business here. But, you can't just fall off a cliff and, expect people to be so positive. You know what I mean? So that's what I think the frustration was for most people. But this is a really good team. They have over 70 wins right now, Josh. I mean, this is a team that is a World Series contender. Now, there's some decisions we still think they could have made to enhance their chances and still become a better team. But where they're at right now, they're getting back into the groove of things. And sometimes you go through adversity throughout a season. This was the adversity they needed to go through.
And you mentioned about the critiquing the individual players. He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling for Mike Gill. Here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN on a happy hour Friday. You know, I have been critical of this team's approach at the plate at times. I have been vocal about how I don't understand how this team sometimes has these at-bats where they look like they don't know what they're doing. And then other at-bats, they are just 100% zoned in. So, I don't know who to blame that on necessarily, Nick, because as you said, they are 21 games over 500. So, it's hard to zero in on the exact why, but I think we know one thing for a fact. When this team is on, they are on. Mm-hmm. And I want to see them crush the Nationals the next few days so they can get some good vibes for this road trip that is not going to be easy at Atlanta, at Kansas City. And even after those two stops, Nick, it's not like the Phillies have like a cakewalk to the end of the year.
They don't.
So get the wins now so you can carry that with you into September.
Yes. I mean, the upcoming schedule is pretty tough. I'm not going to lie. Like after you're done with the Nationals, after the Nats, you go on the road, you play the Braves, you play the Royals, then you come back home, play the Astros, and play the Braves again. So this is a tough month for the Phillies. That's why it's so important to win all of these home games against bad teams. And I gotta respond to a text from Cole from LBI, Josh, right now. He texts in saying the Phillies win 2 games and they are back, question mark. And the one win against the Marlins, your starting pitcher gave up 5 runs. It's baseball. It's the ultimate 500 sport. I need to see the Phillies win close, tough games against good teams to be able to say they are back and have any confidence in the Phillies in the postseason. I just got to respond to that. By the way, you're talking about when Tyler Phillips gave up the 5 runs against the Marlins. The bullpen gave up 0. Zip. The bullpen was fantastic. So I'm going to take that away from that game. And the offense has been really good. The thing you need in baseball is confidence. And it's mostly a mental game, right? And when the Phillies have everything going right like they do right now, and they haven't had everything go right offensively over the course of the past month, this is something you can build off of, and this is how teams catch fire. They catch fire against these bad teams, and this is what they've been able to do.
Phillies are 5-1 against the Dodgers this year. They're 3-0 against the Milwaukee Brewers. They're 4-2 against the Mets, and they are, where's the Padres? They're 5-1 against the Padres. They're 5-2 against the Giants. They're 4-2 against the Cardinals. So I would ask Cole from LBI, are those good enough teams for the Phillies to win against?
They took 2 or 3 from the Dodgers during one of their worst stretches of the season. Like, they still beat the Dodgers, like, twice. Took them 2 out of 3, and then they swept them earlier before the rut. So I don't know where Cole's trying to get at.
I'm just saying, those are good teams.
Yes.
Those are, I named a bunch of teams that are going to be in the postseason or should be in the postseason. The Brewers are winning the Central, I believe, right? Like, I think we all can agree on that. Well, you beat them 3-0 against them. The Padres are probably the hottest team in baseball right now, right? 9-1 the last 10 games. Mm-hmm. Well, the Phillies are 5-1 against the Padres. I mentioned the Dodgers, 5-1 against the Dodgers this year. The Mets might make the playoffs instead of the Braves, by the way, if things play out a certain way. The Phillies outscored them by 13 runs. They're 4-2 against them. And I mentioned the Cardinals are 4-2.
They've beaten good teams.
Right. So I don't understand what Cole from LBI's win close games against good teams. Well, they've beaten a bunch of good teams. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and break down every game of the Phillies season with you, Cole, but I think that you're being a little presumptuous there, buddy.
Well, a little harsh right there. I mean, what else do you want them to do? I mean, they got 71 wins on the season right now. I understand they've been struggling lately, but it's not like they're the worst team in baseball. Like, they're still really good, and they're playing against 2 bad teams. They split with the Marlins, and they just scored 30 runs in 2 games. I mean, what else do you want them to do? You can't make the schedule for them. You just can't.
David in Violin chimes in at 609-403-0973. He says, I actually forgot the Eagles were even playing at the same time as the Phillies last night. He said, but I cussed out my brother last week for what he had to say about the Phillies. Today, all he could do is praise preseason football. I'm not inviting my brother to any postseason Phillies games. That's from David in Violin.
And I'm also going to take credit. I have not attended a Phillies game all month. Just so you know, just so you're aware, I'm not going in the nosebleeds. I'm not doing it. I banned myself from going to any game. I went to the Eagles practice. I went to a concert. I'm not going to the Phillies game till September. I will go back in September when the vibes are back again. Okay.
What do you Green Day? Wake me up when September.
Yeah, wake
ends?
me up when September ends, and I'll be there. Okay. Oh man.
By the way, David goes on to say that from Vineland, I should say, 609-403-0973. He says, "You nailed it. The highest batting average of baseball right now is 366. Baseball is a sport of inconsistencies and probably the streakiest of all the sports, in my opinion." And I think that's the important thing to remember. You know, it's the idea that you just got to accept that you're not going to win every game. You know, if you win 100 games, Nick, that means you lost 62.
Yes.
And I don't care who you are, losing 62 times over the course of several months is not exactly fun.
Not fun. No, I mean, you lose a lot in baseball. I mean, it's a sport of losing. You're just going to lose a lot. You're not going to, you're failing. A really good player is failing 7 out of 10 times. I mean, that's just the nature of the sport. And the Phillies are really good. Just leave it there. They're a really good team. They're a very talented team, but they have a lot of streaky hitters. And that's what happens when everyone goes cold at the same time. You're going to lose ball games, and it's not going to look very pretty, especially when you're a power hitting baseball team. That's what's going to happen. So, listen, they're coming out of it. You could feel something switch after that grand slam. And last night it carried over. Baseball's a sport of momentum, and the Phillies have a little bit of momentum on their side right now. They just got to continue pushing it throughout the rest of this series. Why not sweep the Nationals? Why not?
By the way, I'm convinced now that Charlie from Vineland is my brother from another mother.
Brother from another mother.
Because he just dropped into the text board the Dominic Toretto quote on the text board at 609-403-0973. I'm sure that you've never watched a Fast and Furious movie in your life, Nick Earnshaw.
No, I have. It's just, it's okay.
But,
it's okay, series. It's okay.
The famous line for the first movie where he says, "Ask any racer. It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning is winning."
It's a W. It's a W. That's all it is. It's a W. So, listen, they've won 2 straight. That's what you need, okay? You need to just pile on wins at home right now because you're going on the road once again. And those road trips are tough, and you're playing really good teams. The schedule has been harder here in the second half, harder than it was early on in the season. So when you're winning games against the Nationals, you're taking care of business. You got to ride that momentum.
By the way, we got to shout out Will B, who, for those who don't know, Will B who lives in Mays Landing but is currently in Avalon, was the guy who said a few days ago, we put the poll question, he said that I sound like Jonah Hill's character from Superbad.
Yeah.
Well, did you see the final result of the poll, Nick Earnshaw?
No, I didn't. What was it?
50-50.
Oh, it did end up being 50-50?
Straight down the middle. Now, I will say this. I have noticed. Now, Will, who lives in Mays Landing but is currently in Avalon, I will tell Will that I did my own personal survey off the radio, okay? Of people who I'm friendly with, right? All the dudes who I asked this question to, Nick Earnshaw, said that they think that maybe I sound like Jonah Hill's character from 21 Jump Street, but not Jonah Hill's character from Superbad, because they felt like Superbad was maybe too young of a version of Jonah Hill. When I asked women this question, they all said absolutely not. And I actually got one who texted me a hell no.
Oh, man.
So I'm wondering if this is like a male versus female thing. You know what I mean?
Is this a gender thing? I don't know.
Right. I'm just wondering.
That's your personal poll. I mean, that's just what the results showed.
Right. So, I mean, if the online poll was 50-50 and I'm getting a explicit gender, differentiation, I'm just saying maybe Will from Mays Landing, who is currently in Avalon, maybe he's just expressing a general perception out there.
Right. Right. I see where he's coming from. I can hear it a little bit. I don't think it's that strong. You sound like him, but I don't know.
Well, you know who gave me the best explanation?
Well, who was this?
It's your boy Clemic.
Clement M.
Because Clemic said that the reason why he thinks that the person made sense is because he said that there's a lot of times that when I'm on the radio, I start out very deliberate and then I speed up. Like I kind of ramp up my voice up and down. So Clemick said that he thinks that's why people think I sound like Jonah Hill, because he said a lot of Jonah Hill's characters have that type of speech pattern.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point.
Great breakdown by Clemick, isn't it?
I mean, what a breakdown by Clement M over there. I mean, listen, if you listen to his voice, because I went and watched one of the clips from Superbad, and just to kind of compare, right before I called in when this all happened, when this all took place. What was it, Tuesday? I guess it was Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it was.
It was Tuesday.
I listened to, and then I listened to your voice. I'm like, I hear it a little bit. So that's probably, Clement M might have the best explanation that I've heard so far about how you may sound a little bit like Jonah Hill. Just
by the way, so Will, who's from Mays Landing, but currently in Avalon, followed up. He said, to be fair, I've been listening to you and the Sports Bash for roughly half a decade. And I've had this opinion since the first time I heard you on the air. I don't know why it took me 5 years to text you, though.
Yeah, a little late. You could have texted it when you first heard it. You could have texted right away. You should have.
Well, maybe he was busy the first time he heard me.
True.
Maybe he was working. Nick, I don't want to throw the guy under the bus. What if he has a job where he is not? What if he was washing dishes?
Because sometimes,
first time he heard,
your voice can evolve too. I mean, that's another thing. Like your voice,
I do have range.
Yeah,
I do have range.
It could change up at times. So.
It's funny though, because Will says he's been a fan and listening for years. We thank you for listening to 97.3 ESPN for all these years.
Much appreciated.
But I do know that there are some people, I was out at a brewery one time, and I was talking to somebody, and somebody else at the brewery overheard me and said, he walked by on his way out the door, he says, I've heard you enough on the radio this week. I'm leaving.
That is fantastic.
And I had to laugh.
You can't even respond to that. There's no response to that. It's
the guy mic dropped me on his way out the brewery.
He's like, I'm sick and tired of hearing your voice. I've heard it enough all week. Let me get out of here. I could go to another place. Oh man, that's funny.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig. Here on the Sports Bash, filling in for Mike Gill on a happy hour Friday on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, we will get some drink recommendations a little bit later in the show. But coming up next, when I spoke to Mike McGarry on Wednesday, he said it was put up or shut up time for the Phillies, Nick Earnshaw. Has Mike McGarry changed his mind, or is he still tooting the same story after 2 wins? We'll ask him coming up next on 97.3 ESPN.
It's this.
Mike Rowe here with a few thoughts on my favorite sweatshirt, a classic zip-up hoodie that used to be navy blue but has since faded to what the fashionistas call a distressed indigo. It's 13 years old, soft as a flannel bathrobe, and after a few hundred dirty jobs, demonstrably and undeniably indestructible. This is the kind of sweatshirt girlfriends like to permanently borrow, but I've held on to this one because I got it from American Giant. American Giant makes all their stuff right here in the USA so they can control every link in their own supply chain. That matters because when you buy American Giant, you not only get great quality, you create jobs for people in factory towns all over the country. No pressure, but if you give a damn about the business of making things in America, you got to support the companies who are doing it right. Go to american-giant.com/Mike to get 20% off your first order. That's american-giant.com/Mike.
Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Along with Nick Earnshaw, I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill here on a happy hour Friday edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. As promised, joining us, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. His must-win columns, thepressofatlanticcity.com. Earlier this week, he wrote about the Phillies and their predicament of losing Nick Earnshaw. So now, Mike, after 2 wins, have the Phillies finally, gotten themselves back on track, or do you need to see more, Mike McGarry?
I need to see more, right? I mean, you can't erase poor play since really June 10th with 2 games. Now, is this a good start to sort of changing the narrative? Do they seem to have more of a sense of urgency the last couple of nights? Absolutely. So is it a good start? But yes, we need to see more, to be convinced that they've kind of turned it around and recaptured the team they were early in the season.
Mike, it's interesting because I'm not going to sit here and act like they've solved all their problems because they haven't. But I would say that, I am encouraged that they're moving in the right direction, especially considering the fact that, I know people might point to the offense, but Mike, how about the bullpen? The bullpen is finally starting to look like they're doing their job again.
Yeah, I mean, Strom and Hoffman in particular look like they were early in the season. In fact, Rob Thompson mentioned the other night that he thought Hoffman's slider, I guess it was Wednesday night, looked as good as it has been all season. So I think those are positive signs. But, Jose Alvarado is still struggling. Estevez came back with a good outing after he gave up the home run the other night. So, yeah, the makings of the bullpen, things are looking better. But, again, you can't play poorly for a 54-game stretch that began on June 10th and now play well and win back-to-back games and just, wipe your hands and say we're back. I have to see more.
Hey, Mike, I got to ask you about the players-only meeting, whatever happened a couple of days ago. And since then, it seems like the vibes have changed. The tone has changed around this team. They've had, 30 hits in the past 2 days. How important do you think that meeting that they're so mum about was for this team?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be quality of opposition. You hear stories in the past like it was a good time to throw a team meeting when, Steve Carlton was pitching or Cole Hamels was pitching, right? I mean, good day for a team meeting to sort of turn things around. I think Kyle Schwarber's home run was a big deal, a potential narrative changer, the grand slam he hit on Wednesday night that gave them the lead, and then they ran away with that game. I did notice last night going into the clubhouse, I don't know if it was the Weston Wilson cycle, but the clubhouse was a lot more upbeat. It was louder. There were a lot more guys around, a lot more guys socializing after even past wins that we've seen. So maybe things are changing, but again, 2 games does not judge it. 3 games with the Nationals coming up. Take 2 out of 3. They have a 4-2 homestand, which we said was bare minimum. I'd like to see them take all 3 to go 5-1 on this homestand, and then we'll see what they do against the Braves next week.
It's funny you say that, Mike, because even if they do go 5-1, that game against the Braves is in Atlanta. Then you go to Kansas City. Then you come home again to face the Astros and the Braves. So it's not like the schedule is going to be a cakewalk for them heading into September. So you could argue that, if you're supposed to beat the bad teams, right? Like the idea is if you're a good baseball team, 20 games over 500, you're supposed to beat the Nationals. So in theory, if they don't go 5-1, as you said, one could argue that that's a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. However, I will take 4-2. We said 4-2 before this homestand. 2 out of 3 over the weekend gets you to 4-2. 5-1 would be ideal. And that, serves as a sort of launching pad going into this 2-week stretch where you play the Braves twice. And they're in control of the division now, but you really got a chance to sort of salt the division away, if you play well against the Braves over the next 2 weeks. So, yeah, they're doing what they have to do against the Marlins and the Nationals. And to me, I'm not going to ding them for the quality of opposition. They're doing what they have to do, and they didn't do that, for much of the past 54 games before this stretch.
Mike, I got to ask you about the starting pitching. I know the 6-man rotation question has come up. The Phillies only have their starters basically through the weekend set. I know Rob Thompson doesn't love going to a 6-man rotation, but do you think they kind of work in Tyler Phillips for a little bit when Ranger comes back?
Yeah, I think when Ranger comes back, I think they'll go to a 6-man rotation. I think they've got a long stretch of games upcoming here where they don't have a day off. And I think it'll be just a 6-man rotation for like a 2-week period, basically. Right. I don't think you're going to see it for the rest of the season. I think it's through this stretch where they don't have a day off, basically, coming up. I think they might use it then. But obviously, to have a 6-man rotation, you've got to have 6 starters. And, Tyler Phillips, Bishop Eustace guy is a great story. It was a great story early in the season. Complete game shutout at one point. but his last couple of outings, he's been shaky. So keep that in mind. In order to have a six-man rotation, you've got to have six quality starting pitchers. And, do they have that? Well, we'll see. But if they do go to a six-man rotation, I think it'll only be for like a 2-week stretch in late August, early September. And then once you have a lot of days off in September, I think they'll be back to, keeping guys on their usual, 4-day rest.
We're talking with Mike McGarry of the Press of Atlantic City, AC Press McGarry on the Twitter X platform. Joining us here on the Sports Bash, Josh Edding and Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. You mentioned going into September, Mike McGarry, if Dave Dombrowski and Sam Fuld took you aside at the ballpark and said, hey, Mike, who do you think we should call up in September? Who would you recommend?
Well, call up from AAA, interesting, Cody Clemens is a guy that I think you'll see back when the rosters expand. I think Marchand is another guy you'll see when the rosters expand. I think they've got a number of sort of interchangeable relievers that they can kind of bring up to ease their bullpen, but I don't think they're going to promote anybody who's going to have a big impact in September. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Weston Wilson after the cycle last night. Is he a guy, they have been crying out for somebody from the right side of the batter's box to hit with power to provide some offense from that side. They thought it was going to be Austin Hayes. He comes over from Baltimore in the trade. He plays okay, but then he ends up getting hurt. Supposed to come off the injured list on Sunday. He does not. We'll see, can Weston Wilson sort of ride a hot streak here and maybe get them home in September? And every really good baseball team I've ever seen has guys like Weston Wilson and Tyler Phillips and even Cody Clemens early this season and even Colby Allard, guys who come up that you don't expect to contribute and end up contributing.
Mike, there's one name you did omit from what your answer just there. Does Scott Kingery get a call up in September? I mean, a lot of people are on that train right now. Would he get a look? I mean, he's been pretty good down in AAA.
Look, he's not on the 40-man roster, I don't believe, so I know his numbers are great in AAA, but for whatever the reason is, they choose not to bring him up. They know him better than we know him. They see him on an everyday basis. They must know something that we don't know. So, yeah, I know. I look at his numbers, and it's almost like he's being held captive out there in Allentown in Lehigh Valley, right? It seems like, they bring up a lot of guys. Why not Kingery? But they haven't done it so far, so I don't see why they would do it now.
Mike, you mentioned about Kingery, whether they should call him up or not. I know Nick is very much advocated. What is your theory on the idea of bringing up Rafael Marchand, having giving Real Muto some extra days off?
Yeah, well, I just think when the roster expands, to me right now, Marchand is the backup catcher, right? If JT Realmuto were to go down, Marchand is going to get the majority of the time behind the plate. He just hasn't played a lot of baseball the past 3 years, so it's better for him to be in Allentown, getting regular at-bats every day, catching every day. So if something does happen to JT, he can sort of slide in there, basically. So I'm just, when you expand the roster, I would expect Marchand to be a guy who's kind of promoted back up here.
Mike, in the National League East, both the Braves and the Mets are 4-6 in their last 10 games. Heading down the stretch, the Phillies will face both of those teams at different points in the schedule. Which of those two teams is going to be the bigger threat to the Phillies moving forward?
Well, I think it's obviously the Atlanta Braves, right? I don't think the Mets are that great of a team, and I suspect that the Mets might sort of run out of gas here. Like, the baseball season is a cross-country trip, and you're driving it, right? And I think the Mets car is going to spring a transmission leak here and run out of gas. If you're going from New York to Los Angeles, they're going to hit, the edge of California and kind of run out of gas in the desert there. So I don't think the Mets are. The Braves, on the other hand, they got Michael Harris back last night. He hit the grand slam on the night before. Matt Olson's still there. Chris Sale's still there. Max Fried's still there. The Braves have some, winning DNA in them. So I would obviously be more worried about the Atlanta Braves than I would be the New York Mets.
Mike, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up to you today. Josh and I talked about it a little bit yesterday. The MLB the report about the MLB wanting to maybe go to a 6-inning limit for pitchers. I just got to get your thoughts. What did you think of that report?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely insane. I don't think it'll ever happen. I think they're looking for ways to kind of make the starting pitcher relevant again. And I know there were things like if he gave up 4 earned runs, you could take him out early and stuff like that. But they invest millions and millions of dollars in these pitchers. And you know, I'm an old-time baseball guy, or I'm an old guy. I can remember baseball in the 70s, right? For every Steve Carlton or Tom Seaver who threw 300 innings for 20 years and threw all sorts of complete games and was a Hall of Famer, there's a Gary Gentry who pitched for the New York Mets in the 1960s and 70s and came up and threw 200 innings his first 4 or 5 seasons. And then, you know, his arm fell off and he was basically out of baseball when he was 26, 27 years old. There's no way they're going to allow the investment they have in these players to kind of be used like that. And think about this, Nick. I mean, you would almost have to have a bullpen guy ready to throw 6 innings every night. Because suppose your starting pitcher shows up that day and says, well, I've got a sore back, I can't pitch. Now you've got to turn to somebody has to be in the bullpen, stretched out and ready to go and be able to throw 6 innings. And suppose the next day the guy comes in and says, well, I'm sick. And your bullpen guy just threw 6 innings the night before. Now you got to have 2 guys in the bullpen stretched out. What do you have, 30 guys down there? We already have 13, 14 pitches down there. So I don't see practically, although in theory I understand what they're trying to do, and that make the starting pitcher relevant again. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, and I understand they're worried about all the injuries with the max velocity, et cetera, but this would, like, handicap managers. Like, I don't even know what you're supposed to do as a manager if your guy has to go 6 innings. I know they'd have some limitations about 100 pitches, injuries, whatever, but it would just be ridiculous to have a limit. I think baseball is just trying to do too much here, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. Look, the manager, don't you think the manager, you know, wants, like Rob Thompson, the last thing he wants to do is go get a pitcher in the 3rd or 4th inning. He's not doing it because he wants to do it. He wants the guy to throw 8 innings of shutout ball, and he can sit there and just relax and enjoy the show, basically. So, yeah, I understand, you know, they're trying to bring back the starting pitcher, you know, make it again one of the glamour positions. It is one of the glamour positions. But again, I just caution people, and everybody likes to say, oh, when I was a kid, you know, Bob Gibson threw 800 innings and he pitched every 3rd day and stuff like that. Well, for every Bob Gibson, Tom Seaver, and, you know, Steve Carlton, there was a Mark the Bird Fidrich, a Gary Gentry, a guy who was extremely talented, but, you know, started pitching 250 innings a year when he was 21 years old, and by the time he was 26, he was out of baseball.
Yeah, I wasn't around for Gary Gentry, Mike McGarry, but I do remember Steve Avery. He had 3 straight, I think it was 210 innings all 3 years, and then his arm fell off.
Right, exactly. And we remember Maddox and Smoltz and Glavine,
right?
But we forget Avery was right there with him.
Yep.
And and he couldn't take it. So for every guy like Greg Maddox that throws 25 years and throws complete games, there's a Steve Avery, and there's more Steve Averys than there are Greg Maddoxes.
Mike McGarry for the Press of Atlantic City at AC Press McGarry on the Twitter X platform. Check out all of his coverage of the Phillies and more at PressOfAtlanticCity.com. Mike, enjoy the weekend. When you come back on Monday, Mike Gill will be back from Virginia.
Well, I'm on the show more than the guy who runs the show. So all right, just explain that one to me. But we'll see. It was a great talking to you guys this week, and we'll see you down the road. Good stuff.
Absolutely. Mike McGarry joining us here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennigan, Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. It'll be interesting to see, by the way, Nick, what does the lineup, you know, the lineup come around at 3 o'clock the last few days.
Yep.
So when we get into the 3 o'clock hour, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Phillies lineup is for tonight. Coming up on the other side, we'll get back to the text board at 609-403-0973. Plus, next hour, John McMullen is back on the show. Eagles preseason game number 2. Nick, it's not about the game. It's about practice. We'll tell you more about that coming up at 3 o'clock today on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
It's this.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Well, I spoke the Phillies lineup into existence, Nick Earnshaw.
You did.
Today's Phillies lineup being brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage. Moving is a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage. And it's the same lineup as last night's. Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, Castellanos, Real Muto, Stott, Weston Wilson in left field, and Rojas in center. I'm happy with this lineup. This is one of the few times this year, Nick Earnshaw, I have been happy with the Phillies lineup.
You're satisfied, Josh, with this. You're okay with it. You don't want Castellanos back in the 2-hole again.
No, I think Castellanos is great in the 5-hole.
Yes, I like him at the 5-hole too. I was just saying the other day, just switching things up for one game's okay. Look what's happened. They've won 2 straight since, Josh.
Yeah, but he didn't stay there. That's the key.
Fine. He didn't need to stay there. That was the whole point. You just needed to change something for one game.
I say Weston Wilson starts tonight, starts tomorrow, and then Marsh can come back on Sunday. How about that?
I'm with you on that. I like it.
Although I'm curious, they've played Stott now 2 straight days against left-handed pitching.
They're giving him every opportunity to fix it. To fix it at the plate.
Speaking of opportunities, there are guys who are getting opportunities for the Eagles. Linebacker, corner, offensive line. Well, that's John McMullen. All that and more coming up next on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Jersey. This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Alongside Nick Earnshaw, I'm Josh Hennick here in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Eagles preseason game number 2. You heard it right here on 97.3 ESPN last night. Although none of the offensive stars played. But this is the time of year where Allen Iverson is incorrect. We need to talk about practice, and the man to talk about it is John McMullen, as we still have position battles, roster spots still up for grabs, as we are weeks away, not days, weeks away still from the start of the Philadelphia Eagles 2024 season. John, welcome back in. How you doing today?
Doing well. Yeah, I mean, practice. Nick Sirianni always says NFL football, the only sport you practice more than you play. So it's a little bit more important than the other sport.
With that being said, John, I wanted to start here with this because I know a lot of people have been going into these games wanting to see some of these defensive players. John, if I had to count the number of texts we get on the text board, it's a ratio of 2-to-1 defense over offense when it comes to questions. So let's start with the linebackers. What is your take on the linebacker foursome? White, Dean, Bond, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. after a few weeks here?
Well, I think Nakobe has proven himself now. He had a really good game yesterday, had a really good game in Baltimore as well. The concerns with him were health-related, understandably coming off last season. I think on Tuesday when they had the joint practice, it was the first time he started next to Devin White, and all of a sudden we go back to the game and he's not starting. And he played better than everybody again. And I got a lot of respect for Vic Fangio, but I've been saying this all day. Look, I think he's missing the boat here if he thinks Nakobe Dean isn't his best linebacker. And I don't think it's particularly close. And Jeremiah Trotter, fifth-round pick. Didn't have a good game last night, but very positive signs early on for him as a rookie, and I think there's a chance for him to get snaps at some point this season, probably not week one. And then with Devin White and Zach Bond, they've been okay. Zach was bad in Baltimore, and he bounced back and played well yesterday in limited snaps. And Devin's been okay. But, I think the ceiling here is clearly Nakobe Dean. And for whatever reason, Vic is dragging his feet to this point. Maybe that changes. Still got plenty of time. Maybe he's trying to light a fire under him. Maybe it's a motivational technique. But I think anybody who puts the tape on yesterday sees the difference between Nakobe and the rest of them.
John, for you, because, you're talking about Nakobe Dean, what is it about Nakobe? Is it just that Dean is the better linebacker, or is he the better fit for what Vic Fangio wants to do?
No, I think he's just the better player, the best player they have at that particular position. I'm not saying he's Fred Warner. I'm saying he's the best of the tallest, the shortest guy at the circus. I mean, it's not the best position in the world, but of what the Eagles have, he's clearly the best player. He's very instinctive. He's good when he's going downhill. Not as good in coverage, but that's one of the most overrated things in the NFL. Everybody talks about these coverage linebackers. I ask everybody now, who are your favorite coverage linebackers in the NFL? Because the whole point of modern offense is to get those guys in space, because they can't match up with playmakers. There aren't a lot of them, and Nakobe's not great at it, but most linebackers aren't great at it.
Hey, John, it's Nick. I wanted to ask you about Kelee Ringo. It seems like he's had a really good camp, had a really good game last night. What were some of your takeaways from Ringo's performance in the game last night?
Yeah, I know everybody is talking. The Patriots threw it for like 90 yards. I mean, so, the corners played well, but I'm not sure they were tested in that environment. That's a bad football team offensively. They're not bad defensively, and you kind of saw that early when they had their starters in there. But offensively, they're not good. And Jacoby Brissett is not that good, and he was probably having a bad night on top of it. So I don't think the corners were tested that much. But as far as Kelee as a prospect, I'm very high on him. The issue is, Isaiah Rodgers has kind of overtaken him at the right cornerback slot, at least when you look at potentially being the week one starter. Kelee tends to be a game day player, and he doesn't perform as well in practice. And that's going to have to change, I think, before Vic Fangio trusts him enough to put him ahead of somebody like Rodgers at this stage.
Talking with John McMullen here from Jacob Media. Of course, you can catch Birds 365 on the Jacob Media Sports YouTube channel throughout the week. John covers the Eagles 365 all season long, joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John, you mentioned about Ringo and Rodgers, and one of the concerns I've heard from a lot of people is the fact that, well, let's be realistic. Isaiah Rodgers is basically my height. And when you're going against guys like Christian Watson and Mike Evans in the first few weeks of the NFL season, that's a pretty bad matchup. I don't care how twitchy, fast, explosive he is. So is this team going to be able to hide those kind of matchups, or is that going to present itself as a sore thumb during the season?
Well, I think, you got a 50-50 shot that Christian's going to be hurt. that might help. Mike Evans is obviously, he's a Hall of Fame player. I don't know how anybody matches up with that kind of size. So, yeah, it's a little bit better if you have somebody like Ringo out there who's long and lengthy, but it's still a mismatch when you get those really big receivers like Mike Evans. So that's kind of part of it. It's kind of baked into it. I don't like the way the Eagles are handling or have handled the Cooper DeJean injury, and Cooper's back, and he was, limited fashion finally on Tuesday, and we'll see how quickly he ramps up into team drills. Without him, they've moved Mitchell a lot to the slot, and I think ultimately, and Vic has said it, I mean, he's going to be an outside corner. He's going to be the starting outside corner. So from my perspective, it's like, why are you messing around? Just put him out there, because I think he's got a chance to be a really special player. And I would have, made do for the first couple of weeks till you can get Cooper ramped up with Avonte Maddox in the slot and go in that direction. He seems to want to get either Rodgers, Ringo on the field with Mitchell inside. Now, if they're only using two corners, Mitchell will play outside. It'll be Mitchell and Slay, and then he'll kick inside when Rodgers has got to come on. Ultimately, you think about Green Bay. Obviously, they're not going to not force you to put three corners on the field very much. So those are the guys that are going to get the major snaps week one. And look, Green Bay's got really good receivers, bunch of young receivers. They're all good. They're all playmakers. It's going to be a difficult matchup no matter what. But from the Eagles' perspective, they have a lot more talent this year at corner than they had last year. That doesn't mean there's not going to be hiccups. They're going to have bad games against good receivers, especially the younger guys. But at least it's going in the right direction from a talent standpoint.
John, one guy who got the start last night and you got to see was Bryce Huff. And he talked about after the game not having to go up against Lane Johnson. He looks a little bit better going up when it's not Lane Johnson, right?
I've been talking about that since. It's funny because I was talking about it with a bunch of reporters.
Yeah.
Like Hassan Reddick never did anything in practice. Ever. And then nobody, and all of a sudden Bryce Huff shows up and it's a big deal. Look, Micah Parsons doesn't do anything against Lane Johnson. Nick Bosa hasn't done anything against Lane Johnson. So I've always said pretty much daily, I'm not concerned about Bryce Huff. He's going to be fine. And I think you kind of saw that yesterday going against average or slightly below or slightly above average tackles versus a Hall of Famer. Every day. And Jordan as well, because he flips sides occasionally, and Jordan's tremendous as well, but he's not gonna go up against those guys. So I think people are way off base about Bryce Huff, and I think he's going to be fine.
John, you mentioned the offensive lineman. It reminded me of, I wanted to ask you, because you and I haven't talked this week yet. So Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata were on Chris Long's podcast, the Greenlight Pod, and they talked about how, in the past, when in training camp, you have, pretty simplistic defenses you're working against. And Lane talked about how, Fangio is basically throwing the book at them in practice. And Lane is saying that he thinks that them seeing Fangio's defense for months is going to help them in real games because they're not going to see that much complexity in the regular season. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Eagles kind of got lucky this year in the preseason, too, because they're facing Baltimore, who does a lot of unique things, New England, who does a lot of unique things, and what do you see Saturday? Flores acts like every game's the Super Bowl, so right. they're gonna see blitzing like you've never seen before with Flores.
Wink Martindale will be proud, John.
Yeah, so. From that standpoint, as far as exotic looks, the preseason schedule couldn't have worked out better for the Eagles and seeing those types of things, because once you get to the regular season, it's going to be scaled back for their perspective. And that wasn't done by design. That was just kind of luck and the way certain guys handle it. Now, nobody knew how Gerard Mayo as a new coach was going to do things, but And it'll be more, I think, so Baltimore and Minnesota. But, two good tests, and they struggled picking up the blitz. So to face those two particular teams. And this Saturday, nobody's playing this Saturday, so I'm not sure how it. Like Lane's not playing, Jordan's not playing. They didn't play yesterday, so I'm not sure how much that helps from the actual game perspective. But yeah, Vic runs a very complicated defense. The only problem is the Eagles have seen it for 3 years now, and this will be the fourth. Now, he might teach it better, but they've seen all the concepts. So I think I didn't see their interview. I saw Chris when he was here, was talking to him, but I didn't see that particular interview. But, I mean, they should be used to Vic's scheme by now, I would think. I think the better part is seeing the others, but the starters aren't playing, and understandably so, by the way.
I'll send you the link on text later so you can check it out for yourself, because I'm sure you'll glean something from it that you can use the next time you talk to those guys. John McMullen joining us. Jacob Media, Birds 365 is the show, Monday through Friday mornings, the Jacob Media YouTube channel. John, you mentioned how the starters weren't playing, so you kind of led me into my next thought, which is, boy, do Philly fans love nothing more than creating a controversy when there isn't none?
Oh man!
I mean,
that ruined all last night on our post game show this morning on Birds 365. I'm like, I'm like, come on, people! You have to understand the difference. Like Kenny Pickett played poorly. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to defend Kenny Pickett. But he's playing with backup guys. He's a backup himself. And the Patriots played a lot of their starters on the front.
Yep.
And their defense isn't bad. And they couldn't hold up in pass protection. And then they started subbing out offensive linemen, and it got worse. And they couldn't hold up. In the second half, and Tanner played very well in his opportunities. But he's a third-teamer. He's playing against third-teamers, and guys are going to be delivering packages for Amazon in 10 days,
right?
Versus, I mean, you have to add that context into it. And look, he deserved, and it's not like I'm Nostradamus, but I predicted exactly what Nick Sirianni would say before he said it. And he explained the protection issues, and Kenny's number 2. Kenny's going to be the backup quarterback, but they do like Tanner McKee. They think he's a real legitimate developmental prospect. And to give Tanner credit, when you watch these preseason games, and I believe we should ban NFL preseason football in polite society. It's that bad. It's that awful. But when you play, you see third-string quarterbacks elsewhere, and it's just god-awful.
Right.
So from that standpoint, he played well, and he looked good. So I get why people are excited about it. But you know what's interesting to me, Josh?
What's that?
About Joseph Nada dominating against third and fourth teamers. Nobody talks about Thomas Booker dominating because they don't care. They only care about the quarterback.
Well, the reason why I bring up the quarterback is because, John, you just mentioned how the Eagles' second offensive line, the second team, is out there getting wrecked by the Patriots' first-team defense. And it's not like the Patriots have Matthew Judon anymore. He's in Atlanta. So I'm sitting there watching the game last night, and people are complaining about, oh, man, Kenny Pickett doesn't look good. And, John, my question was, can we maybe have a conversation that maybe Brett Toth shouldn't be the backup center? I'm not trying to be mean, but, poor Kenny Pickett's not even getting a clean snap sometimes.
Well, that's the thing. And even at practice, in a normal year, it's the same thing happened to Marcus Mariota last year. If you remember, Brett was having really difficult a time with shotgun snaps last year, to the point that Marcus was basically playing shortstop before he would play quarterback. He'd have to grab the snap before he could play quarterback. It would ruin the timing of everything. All the reps were basically useless. Now, I'm exaggerating, but a lot of reps were useless because of the snaps, and they had to bring in Josh Andrews just to be a practice center, just to snap the ball. And, I've always said this about, in the NFL these days, defensive front is a rotational position. So most teams have a bunch of defensive front people, edges and interior guys who can play and play a decent amount. And whereas offensive line, it's you play 100% of the time, the starters, barring injury or anything of that nature, and the backups don't play. And that kind of explains why those second-team reps all across the league, not just in Philadelphia, tend to be pretty ugly because most teams have more defensive front people that are capable players than offensive line.
John, one player in particular that's kind of stood out during the preseason is Will Shipley. I mean, what's his role heading into the season? He's been really good in camp and throughout the preseason games, but what would his role be heading into the season?
Yeah, he's not going to have a big role early as long as Saquon and Kenny Gainwell are healthy. Obviously, it's a position that takes a lot of punishment, and to get through 17 games unscathed at running back is probably unlikely. So you do expect him to get involved at some point as somebody gets banged up during the season. But I would say week one, he's the third running back. He's not going to have much of a role. He's going to be a backup kickoff returner. If he's active, he'll help on coverage teams. And we'll see how the Eagles utilize that. They'll probably want to keep him active as a third running back in case somebody gets banged up during the game. So he'll have a small role as a special teams player. But as far as taking the football from the line of scrimmage, the Eagles they're so loaded at playmaker. You got to feed AJ, you got to feed Devontae, Dallas, Saquon, Kenny is going to have a role. You got a ways to go before you get to Will Shipley, but that's fine. He's a rookie, and he'll get his opportunity at some point.
John, you led me right into the final thing I want to hit on with you is about the receiver, because you're right. Brown, Smith, they're 1-2. That's definitive. But what if somebody twists an ankle? What if someone gets a concussion? The number 3 receiver is going to be very interesting. And as of right now, John, I don't think there's a clear guy who's going to be the right guy. And so I'm wondering, does Philadelphia keep trying these guys out, or does Howie need to get on the phone and maybe start making some calls?
Yeah, he's already made those calls. I think if there's one position he's likely to go outside the organization here in the final days, it'll be wide receiver. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think people are too hyper-focused on wide receiver 3. That's not that big of a deal as long as AJ and Devontae are there, because it's going to be a low-traffic position. They're not going to get a lot of balls thrown their way. And they can piecemeal that. If you want a slot receiver, you can use a traditional slot. You can use Britton Covey. If you want a red zone threat or somebody to block, maybe use Johnny Wilson. If you want a yards after catch guy, maybe it's Paris Campbell a little bit. So you can piecemeal that. But if that sprained ankle you're talking about props up and you need somebody to play 70 snaps, that you got a big issue. And that's what they have to find. And there's so many receivers in the NFL, they'll be able to find somebody who's cut somewhere else, who's better than what they have. But you don't want Johnny Wilson playing 70 snaps at this stage, or Joe Nada playing 70 snaps. But you can't replace players like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I think people understand that. But what you need is competency.
Right.
And so you can win in other ways. And right now, I don't think they have that if that sprained ankle pops up and they need to find it.
Yeah, and Paris Campbell can't stay healthy either, so let's not forget about that as well. John McMullen at JF McMullen on the Twitter X platform. Check him out on Birds 365 on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. And he joined us here on a Friday edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John, appreciate you jumping on today. When you're back next week, Mike will be back as well.
Did he win? Did he win the World Series?
They did not.
Is that what's going on? All right. Well,
yeah,
did they compete well?
They're on their way back right now. Mike told me they didn't win, so.
All right. Disappointing.
Yeah,
But
they tried.
It's good to talk to you, buddy.
John, good to hear from you. Always great stuff from John McMullen here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig, along with Nick Earnshaw, filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash with the 3 o'clock hour being brought to you by Broadlease Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Broadlease is your trusted source for heating and air conditioning service and maintenance, as well as plumbing and installation and maintenance for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907 or visit them online at broadlease.net. Coming up next, we'll check back in on the text board at 609-403-0973, along with your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. We got Tom from Margate texted in earlier, as well as Jeff from Ocean City. Let us know, what are you consuming on this happy hour Friday or this weekend at the Jersey Shore? You know, Nick, we only have a few more of these weekends until summer is over and football is here. So people got to go out there and enjoy themselves this weekend. Let us know what you're doing. 609-403-0973.
You're listening.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it. Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
Ask any racer, any real racer. It don't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning.
That is the quote from Charlie and Violent earlier that Nick Earnshaw had no clue about here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Whoa. I had a clue. I just didn't know what you were referring to. Once you showed it to me, I was like, oh, I've seen that clip from Fast and Furious before. I've seen it before.
Have.
I have. I'm just not a Fast and Furious fanboy like you. Is this it? Is it again?
Oh, no. This is from the soundtrack.
Oh.
He's Nick Earnshaw, very young. I'm Josh Hennig, not too old, here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Phillies lineup came out early today. I guess Rob Thompson and the Phils didn't have to talk too much about it, Nick Earnshaw. So they brought it out early. Same lineup as yesterday as they go against Patrick Corbin, who stinks, and the Nationals tonight. Weston Wilson, will he repeat his performance? We'll get to that and more right now on the text board as promised. 609-403-0973. Tom from Margate chimes in, Nick Earnshaw. He calls you Nick at night, by the way.
Oh.
How do you feel about that?
I like it because I'll be filling in for you tonight.
That is true. Nick
during game night.
On game night.
Yeah, how about that?
He says, Josh and Nick at night, you guys are 100% right. The Phillies are getting hot at the right time. Now, Tom has a different perspective on my voice. He says that your voice is like supersonic tonic.
Supersonic tonic? What does that mean? I don't even know what that means.
I was hoping you would, because I don't either.
I don't know. I don't know what it's in reference to, unfortunately. I'm sorry. I didn't know if that was something that was before my time, might be showing.
Oh, it probably is.
Yeah, I have no idea. I know Sonic, the hedgehog. I know that guy.
I mean, I know that there's a supersonic tonic, which is like, it's like a specific gin with tonic. I know that's a drink.
I know a gin and tonic.
It's like you just like combine words there randomly.
Yeah.
So Tom from Morgan, you got to verify and clarify that for us. Why my voice sounds like supersonic tonic?
Or maybe he just made it up and it sounded fun. It sounds cool. It sounded really cool. It sounded great. It
sounds great.
Text. Yeah. I don't know if it's a
reference. What does your voice sound like? Oh, it sounds like supersonic tonic. And who's going to question it, right?
Yeah.
Except people like me.
I won't. That sounds cool. Sounds like I think it's a compliment.
Oh, well, I'm just the idiot who questions everything.
Yeah.
So, if someone tries to give me a compliment, I'd be like,
don't take it literal, Josh. Gosh.
609-403-0973. Happy Hour Friday. Jeff from Ocean City chimes in. He says, how do you guys feel about the Eagles' backup quarterback controversy? I'm drinking a Wildwood Haze on today's Happy Hour Friday. So, Nick Earnshaw, are you more interested in the Wildwood Haze beer, or are you interested in the Eagles' so-called backup quarterback controversy?
Definitely the beer. I'm not too worried about the backup quarterback controversy. It's going to be Kenny Pickett. He's looked awful in the preseason. I get it. He doesn't look confident in the pocket. I mean, kind of the same thing last year. But again, he played against the Patriots starters and he had backups in front of him. So I'll give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Tanner McKee's played well. He's played well the past 2 years in the preseason, and we've talked about him ad nauseum. It seems like every single time the preseason rolls around because he has shown definite signs. And, I don't think it's a QB controversy. I think this is something people are just reaching for. They're trying to find something with the Eagles. It's like, just get to the season already. Just get to the season. Like, my goodness, we're really going to debate the backup quarterback? Seriously? I mean, Kenny Pickett will be the backup. Tanner McKee, practice squad type guy, maybe dresses as a third quarterback at times during the season, but I mean, that's just how it's going to go. The preseason, even John mentioned it. I mean, what are you going to learn right now from some of these guys? Other positions are more important for the preseason. The backup quarterback position, I'm not too worried about at the moment. I know, Jalen is the quarterback. You want to have somebody at least semi-competent behind him. Kenny Pickett started in this league before. I'm not too worried about it.
By the way, the Wildwood Haze, for those who don't know, that is from Mud Hen Brewing. I looked it up on Untapped. It's a 3.83 on the overall rating, which is pretty good.
That's solid.
For those who don't use Untapped, which as I was telling somebody recently, I was saying, I don't use Untapped enough, honestly. I probably should use it more often. Basically, if anything is a 3.5 or better, Nick, it's probably worth drinking.
It's probably pretty good.
Because what happens is that you always get those like randos who like underrate something because they're just jerks.
Okay.
So what you got to do is you got to realize that almost no brews have like a 4.5 or higher rating ever.
It's never that high. So if you're above 3.5, then you're getting there.
Right. You're in a good range.
Yeah.
And anything above 4 must be excellent.
It must be fantastic. So it's a good range right there.
Yeah. So 3.38 is a good choice. That's Wildwood Haze from Mud Hens, with Jeff from Ocean City is consuming on a Happy Hour Friday. He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Also on the text board at 609-403-0973. Steve from Ventnor chimes in and says, what about the Eagles picking up Juju Smith-Schuster? No.
TikTok boy?
First of all, the Patriots cut him. Wouldn't the Patriots need a guy like that?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in New England.
If the Patriots cut him, why do I want him?
No, the last player we need is Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm sorry. And
that's like driving down the street and you see one of those like trashy car dealerships, but you see a really nice car on the lot and you're like, I'm going to get that car from that dealership. Not thinking that maybe that dealership isn't really reputable, isn't really good, right? Why would you want the nicest car at the worst dealership?
Right. Juju Smith-Schuster, I'm sorry. We can't go down that route. That's not a great route, to go down. Bring him in. He's had history with the Eagles. He's gone back and forth with some of the Eagles, that are on the team now. There's some other free agents out there that I'd probably target over him. Hunter Renfro's still out there.
The Hunter Renfro thing is
I'm just saying.
Because the guy is out there, hasn't been signed by anyone, and he had 2 very productive years with the Raiders. You would think that guy would have been picked up by somebody by now.
I mean, he wasn't picked up, right? Like, I'm not going crazy. Yeah, he's still a free agent.
He is still a free agent. Yeah, it's very weird.
That would make sense. Like that, he's a slot guy. He's had good years in Oakland, but again, in Las Vegas, I should say.
But again, it goes back to why is he still available?
Yeah, You also, Julio Jones is still out there. You could always bring him back. That could always be an option, right?
I think Julio is in the Ndamukong Suh category. It's like break glass in case of emergency.
Michael Thomas, another name, right?
Who?
Isn't Michael Thomas still out there too?
Yeah, but he's washed.
Yeah. But I mean, that's who you're going to get out there, right?
Well, that's why I was asking John about are we talking about a guy who, could be, I mean, how do I put this? Are we talking about a guy that in Howie that's already scouring other teams' rosters?
This is why
and building a list.
I asked
and checking it twice.
I'm pretty sure I asked Mosher this before when I filled in with you, Josh, that maybe Howie's out there looking around the market, right? Like, what would stop him from making a trade? I mean, I could totally see them. They've done it before during the preseason. They've done it right before the season before. I could totally see them going out and getting a third receiver. Do I know who that is? I don't know who they'd go target right now, but I mean, there's some names that are on the market that are proven commodities. Renfrow, I don't get that one. I'm shocked he still has not been signed, because you would have thought he would have been signed somewhere in training camp, first preseason game, but now we're in the second preseason game. We're inching closer to week 1 here, Josh. I mean, I'm shocked no one's picked him up.
It's very strange that in today's NFL, guys that we know have talent are not on teams. And it always makes me incredibly suspicious. And the funny thing is, name me any random team in the NFL, Nick. Just name me a random team.
The Rams.
All right. I'm going to pull up the Los Angeles Rams roster. I was hoping you didn't say the Bills, because I've been ripping the Bills for months now. They had to give Chase Claypool an injury settlement. I don't know if you saw that, because of the fact that he was so bad and his injury was so pathetic, and he's such a little brat. They had to get rid of him. They paid him to go away.
They paid him to play against him.
No, they paid him to go away.
Yeah, just get out of here. Bye. See ya.
It's like my grandmother used to say, don't go away mad, just go away.
Well, there was that line in Moneyball. It was Billy Beane when he's talking to David Justice in the movie.
Yes.
He's like, the Yankees are paying you to play against. I forget the exact line, but it was essentially the same type of thing.
The Yankees are paying you to play against them.
That's what the New York Yankees think of you.
Right, exactly. That was that's how they motivated him. So I'm looking at the Rams depth chart, right? For a wide receiver. Now, we all know who the top guys are. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, right? Can I read you some of the guys who are after the main guys?
Sure.
And I'm fully aware, Nick Earnshaw, that you are not going to know most of these guys.
Let's see.
Okay? J.J. Lapp.
No idea who that is.
DeMarcus Robinson.
I've heard of DeMarcus. Yes, I know DeMarcus Robinson.
What school did he go to?
I don't know what school he went to, but I've heard of him.
Okay, you've heard of him. He's been in the league for 9 years. I thought you might actually know his school.
No, I don't. He's been around for a while. That's why I've known him.
Xavier Smith.
No.
Drake Stoops.
Who?
That's actually Bob Stoops' kid.
Is it really?
Yes.
Yeah. Didn't DeMarcus Robinson? Who did he play? He played for the Chiefs, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he played for the
Chiefs.
Chiefs. That's where I remembered him from. Come on, Josh.
Well, you're a producer and a host, so I figure you might know more than the average host does.
I knew where DeMarcus Robinson was from. I was like, I know that name.
Jordan Whittington.
No. Ty Wington?
No. Different spelling.
Different sport, too.
Different spelling and different sport. And finally, Sam Wiglusz.
You can't tell me any of them are better than the people on the street right now. Some players on the street.
This is what I'm trying to say. There has to be a reason why these guys are on the street that we don't know about.
Well, age is always a concern, but Renfro's 26.
Renfro's not that old.
No, he's not that old.
And neither is Juju.
They're washed, though.
That's what I'm asking.
But Renfro, I wouldn't say is as washed as... I think Juju Smith-Schuster's washed. I don't think Hunter Renfro's washed. Yet.
Yes.
He's still got some football in him. Yet. I don't think he's there yet. He's better than Paris Campbell and John Ross. I mean, right?
Well, but that's the problem. Why are those guys why didn't the Eagles call Hunter Renfrow? Is it Hunter Renfrow built in the same framework as a Cole Beasley?
Well, here's the thing. He might be asking for a lot more money than those guys.
Okay, so now we're going to so you're talking about the Justin Simmons conversation.
Yes, it could be that kind of aspect. Because right?
I was talking with Chris Franklin and Andrew DeCecco yesterday on the Sports Bash about how, we now know the number the Eagles wouldn't sign Justin Simmons for, right? Because the Eagles and Vic Fangio didn't think Justin Simmons was worth $8 million.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
It's probably a money factor. It's got to be. He might be asking for more than teams are willing to give him, and that's why I guess that's why the Raiders are a dumpster fire anyway. But I mean,
they're better now.
Yeah, that's why he might not be going back there. They probably don't want to pay him.
Right, he probably asking for too much money.
Yep.
The problem, like I said, that's why, to me at least, I look at some of this stuff, right? And
the slop, the NFL slop.
These are the questions I think of when I hear these conversations, because it's like I just read you the Rams depth chart of receivers, and it's like you just said it. It's not that those guys are better than Juju Smith-Schuster or Hunter Renfrow in a literal sense,
right?
But there's got to be something that we don't know. You said money. I talked about maybe they're not, as like Michael Thomas is washed. Like that guy.
Well, he's had a ton of injuries.
That guy's cooked.
He's had a lot of injuries, yeah.
Right, but my point is that like there are reasons why these guys are not out there that don't always get discussed. And doesn't mean I want the prettiest car on the worst dealership's lot. Okay? I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, and then we could go back to the Julio Jones thing, right? That's age. That's just clearly age.
Yeah, he's getting older.
He's older. But the Renfrow thing's a little shocking, and I think that it's got to be the contract issue. He might be asking for way too much money, and teams aren't willing to pay him. But, I mean, we're heading into week 3 of the preseason very soon, and he's still unsigned. Like, is someone going to pick him up mid-season? Like, is he gonna fall that far where teams are going to pick him up mid-season? Because that's what it's seeming like it's going to be. I mean, you're getting this close to the regular season starting,
right?
And he hasn't signed anywhere. Like, and the Eagles have a glaring hole at the number 3 spot on their team at wide receiver. You think they'd inquire. You'd think there'd be a little bit of buzz to try and maybe go and get Renfrow. I don't know. I'm very curious to see what Howie Roseman has up his sleeve. Maybe they just go into the season with how it is, right? I mean, you have 2 of the best receivers in football, in Brown and Devontae Smith. You have Dallas Goedert. You might see a lot of different looks. Like John McMullen was kind of mentioning, third receiver might not be as important as we're making it out to be.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. 3 o'clock hour being brought to you by Broadleys Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Broadleys is your trusted source for heating and air conditioning service and installation, as well as plumbing maintenance for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907 or visit them online at broadleys.net. We'll check back in on the text board coming up next. And don't forget, still to come, Adam Kaplan, NFL Insider, for today's edition of Football at 4. And in the 5 o'clock hour, we'll get back to the Phillies with Frank Closer, Phillies Insider from 97.3 ESPN.com. And of course, your guys' Happy Hour Friday recommendations, a special edition of Nick's Nuggets, and more here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig. Not Deadpool and Wolverine here on 97.3 ESPN. I know you haven't seen the movie yet, but this is literally playing during one of the most epic fight scenes in the movie.
You know, every single time that I've come in to co-host with you, filling in for Mike, hey, did you see Deadpool and Wolverine yet? That's the first question I get asked every time I walk in.
Number 1,
no, Josh.
Highest grossing R-rated movie of all time.
Yeah, I'll add to it at some point. Probably when it goes to streaming, but you know, probably not. I wanted to go to the movies to see it, just haven't found the time.
Well, you're too busy watching the Little League World Series.
Damn right.
You're watching too much wholesome content.
Yes, I like Deadpool. Listen, I love Deadpool. I just haven't had time to go.
Because you're watching the Little League World Series.
It's fine. Yeah, I love the Little League World Series.
That's why David and Violent chimed in and says, Nick, what are you drinking this weekend? Are you old enough to drink?
Oh, Dave. Yes. I'm mid-20s now. We went over this a couple weeks ago. I'm in my mid-20s now. I'm 24. So I'm not in my early 20s. I consider myself mid-20s.
That's mid 24 right? Is mid.
Yeah, it's mid. Well, I'm not mid. I don't go there. I wouldn't say I'm
okay.
Mid.
All right, my bad. you Zoomers in your lingo. Sorry, my bad.
Only mid. Come on, no.
Mid, Riz.
Yes.
All those words that like had different meanings like 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. I confuse you every time I talk.
Well, you do because when I was your age, Riz was not a good thing.
Oh, Riz is a great thing. You gotta have Riz.
Well, today Riz is a great thing.
Yes.
But you go back 24, 25 years ago, if you said someone was Riz, it didn't mean what it means now.
Yeah, Riz is a good thing. Riz means that you can, you know how to talk to people. You know how to go and get a girlfriend or a boyfriend. You have Riz.
Do I have Riz?
I'd say you have some Riz.
Okay. I don't know, because it's like, you can't give yourself a nickname. No. Right? Like losers give themselves nicknames.
I've been giving
nicknames. To me, it's like I can't call myself Riz or I can't call myself anything because I feel like I'm an idiot if I do that.
Yeah, no, you're rizzing someone up. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
rizzing someone up.
That's a phrase that's used. Oh yeah. Look it up. Urban Dictionary.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, coming up next, something I'm more familiar with is football talk with Adam Kaplan from the Inside the Birds podcast. He'll join us for football at 4 on the Sports Bash. He's Nick Earnshaw, the Zoomer. I'm Josh Hennig, the Millennial, on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
97.3 ESPN presents the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Kaplan, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I give my heart and soul to this franchise, as so many of us do.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
Along with Nick Earnshaw, I'm Josh Hennig, filling for Mike Gill here at Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it's being brought to you by the Gallery, bar booking games at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Go to the Gallery, go to Ocean, go for the win this football season. For more information, visit theoceanac.com. Eagles preseason game 2, the takeaways with NFL insider Adam Kaplan here on 97.3 ESPN. Adam, welcome in. How you doing today?
Josh, I'm good. I'm glad to be back in my office for a couple days here. I'll go to Eagles practice tomorrow before I go on the road again to finish my training camp tour, my 21st. I was with the Titans and Seahawks this week. But, yeah, look, the Eagles, as we move along here, the Eagles play their second preseason game. They'll finish next week on a very rare 1 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. on a Saturday. They played plenty of preseason games at night on Saturday at home, but I don't remember them ever playing at 1 o'clock on a Saturday, which is interesting.
So, Adam, let's get to some of the takeaways from last night, which was certainly not the prettiest game in the world to watch. And part of the problem was that second unit offensive line. Man, they had some struggles, Adam. I mean, Brett Toth, I still don't understand why this guy keeps getting so much backup center time when he has trouble snapping the ball like that. Talk to us about the offensive line struggles last night.
Yeah, so they started 5 backups. In fact, Josh, all 11 starters were backups last night, whereas defensively, which we'll get, they started a handful of starters, but this is what they did in the first game. Now, just like the first game, weather was a concern. It rained off and on in New England, where in Foxborough it did last night, but in Baltimore, it actually, where they had very bad storms, you and I talked about this last week, it actually dried up before the game, but they want to take a chance, and now that the Eagles, Josh, have not played their offensive starters in the first 2 games, I just don't see them playing in Game 3. It's not the dress rehearsal game anymore because the teams don't look at it that way. Well, before we get out of here, I'll tell you what teams have told me about playing players in preseason and so forth. But getting back to the Eagles' offensive line, Tyler Steen, unfortunately, he got hurt again. It's the same ankle, I believe. He showed tremendous toughness playing last week against Baltimore. It just didn't hold up. I was surprised, Josh, that after the game, right, the Baltimore game, and you could clearly see if you watched it that he was laboring a little bit. He was not even listed on their post-game injury report, and he didn't miss practice time last week. I was surprised by that. But, look, he got hurt. You don't like that. Darian Kennard started again at right tackle. Keegan, who's only played left guard, he started again, and Fred Johnson, who's their backup left tackle, and Brett Toth. So, yeah, we'll find out. We'll put this more on our show for Monday morning on Inside the Birds. We'll find out how he graded Brett Toth. But yeah, he's clearly the second-team center. I'm a little surprised that Matt Hennessy, Josh, has not gotten a shot to be that second-team center. That has kind of been one of the surprises as we've gotten to training camp. Though he's gotten some snaps at center, he's not really been the second-team center. And last night would have been a good time to do it, but they did not.
And, of course, last night it was Kenny Pickett and that second-unit O-line against the first-team Patriots. But then in the second half, it was Tanner McKee, for lack of a better term, shining against the Patriots backups in a backup versus backup matchup. Adam, you and Jeff have talked about on the Inside the Birds podcast about how much the Eagles like their developmental quarterback, Tanner McKee.
Yeah, like last year, training camp wasn't great, but his preseason tape was so good. And you mentioned the developmental term. You're not going to put a guy on waivers who put out tape that teams could see. Teams can't see your practice tape. They can't see your joint practice tape either, but they can see the game tape. Every team sees that. So you're not going to try to sneak him through waivers. That would have been a mistake, and they didn't. And he's had a good training camp, way better training camp this year than last year. You know he's looked good in the preseason. The context is obviously you're talking about third-team defense for New England. A lot of guys who probably won't even be on their football team, some might not even be on the practice squad, but you give him credit. Threw it with great timing. I love that he's willing to hang in there with bodies around him. You like that. And the thing that we don't talk about enough, and I saw this when I've been at camp, is Josh, he's a little bit more mobile this year. He was not, but this year he's more mobile. He's throwing on the run a little bit. Threw from the pocket very well last night. Joseph Ngata was one of his guys last night. I was impressed. I mean, he did a good job. Now, Pickett was under duress a lot. For his first two games, his average per pass attempt is not very high at all, where McKee's is way higher. I'm a little concerned about that. Not way higher, but it's higher. I'm concerned that the protection's not there. By the way, Pickett is more mobile than McKee. He could run. He was more of a runner at Pitt than he has been in the pros. But the Eagles made it clear. The head coach made it clear. Pickett's the 2, McKee's the 3, and that's that. But remember, Pickett signed through 25. McKee signed through 26. So it's not out of the question that Tanner McKee is the long-term backup for Jalen Hurts.
Hey, Adam, it's Nick. One guy who continues to impress is Will Shipley. He's showing off his versatility. He could do a lot of different things. Had that 19-yard screen pass yesterday that he caught. What have you seen out of Will Shipley, and what has the Eagles coaching staff thought of Will Shipley throughout this preseason so far?
Yeah, I know people are talking about him on social media. He's certainly in his little package of plays, which he'll have during the season. He's a chance to help the football team because he could catch. I mean, he moves. We've talked about this now for 3 months. He moves better than Gainwell. Gainwell's a better pass protector. Remember, though, this is Gainwell's last year of his contract, so if the Eagles don't bring him back, Shipley could certainly be the number 2 next season. But right now, Shipley on that second and 22, that screen pass that he caught was really nice for 19 yards. And you got to be patient on screens. Now, I know there was a lot of space because the Patriots were backed off. We got to give proper context. He also got stuffed on a couple runs, but he also showed good vision. And look, he's shown that he'll be a solid 3 in the kind of role that he has. They've got a couple guys that they like. Milton was the one who scored the short yardage touchdown. Maybe he's a practice squad guy. Lou Nichols is a guy is higher thought. Ty Davis-Price, who led them in rushing last night. He's a 13-yarder. He's more of a zone runner. But, yeah, look, this is a stacked running back room, and the good thing is they've got a mixture of younger guys, and they've got the older guy, obviously, in Saquon Barkley.
Adam Kaplan, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, Inside the Birds on YouTube. Don't forget to download the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast. Like, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. Adam, sticky on offense for one more. Joseph Ngata finally has a game. I feel like we've been hearing about and talking about this guy for a couple of years now, and finally, on the sloppy surface of Foxborough, he goes off.
Yeah, and last year, Josh, he was the story of training camp. But because he has separation issues, that means at the top of his route, he's got to be able to separate from the DB, and he just doesn't do that well enough, and that's why he was not drafted. But he's got a big body. And he's a guy, look, at best he's an NFL number 5, okay? That has some value. Whether it's on special teams or if you're backing up the X position, which is A.J. Brown's position, maybe if they continue to hang in with him, maybe he eventually becomes in their backup rotation. So, yeah, it was good. He caught all 5 targets. That's important. You saw the chemistry here with Tanner McKee. I thought that was good. And he showed up. He's a guy that you kind of know what you're getting. I don't see him all of a sudden finding the ability to separate. It's kind of like, I don't want to say it's either you have it or you don't. You can improve it on it, obviously, with coaching. But he's just not good enough in that area, and that's why it's going to be hard for him to make the football team.
Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball where, there were only 4 starters on the field against the Patriots, but, man, that Nakobe Dean keeps looking pretty good, Adam, and this linebacker position is starting to create some separation, at least in terms of the haves and the have-nots.
Yep, it is. Now, Dean, look, he's had let's be honest, he's had a very uneven training camp. Over the last week and a half, he's practiced better. He had a really good practice, the joint practice a couple of days ago, and he showed up in this game. The instincts were never a problem. It's having a smaller frame. We know about the injury history, staying on the field, that kind of thing. So he showed up, no doubt about it. Now, they did start Zach Bond, who was better in this game, with Devin White. And you mentioned, Josh, the only starters, the projected starters that played, and we have to put them in context, that's projected. Bond right now is a starter. He's not a lock to start. Dean now legitimately is pushing him for the first time. Rodgers started. We should mention that. I don't understand this. I'm looking for clarification. I don't know why Bryce Huff started. I know that he needs more work in this defense. This is like a complete 180 from the defense that he played with the Jets. So this is a lot. He's going to drop in coverage more. It's different for him. And he showed up. Look, the joint practice, he was great. This game, he was great, Bryce Huff. So that's Josh, that's an interesting story. That was a stunner to me. I'm like, why, when you're starting so few starters, is a guy's making $17 million a season in the starting lineup? That's not what you normally would do.
Adam, Nolan Smith looked really good last night. He had a sack on Drake May as well. He's going to be a guy who the Eagles are really going to need to step up this season, and he continues to improve. What were some of your takeaways from Nolan Smith?
Yeah, the sack that he had was tremendous. It's a second reaction sack. He actually got chipped, and there were 2 guys there, and he didn't stop on a second reaction sack. That's a great job by him. Last week, the scouting term is called he had an open sack, where you're not blocked. All you have to do is actually tackle. It's right there. Just tackle the guy, and he did. This was a good play. We'll find out what the tape looked like. So, whereas Bryce Huff, we should mention, only played 10 snaps, 18% of the defensive snaps. They took a broader look at Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith is a guy that we could debate. How good is Nolan Smith going to be? He's a smaller guy. We mentioned on Inside the Birds that he's put some weight on. You like that, but he played a lot last night. He played 43% of the snaps, and he's going to be their top outside pass rusher and their top edge rusher coming off the bench. He's got to show he can do it, guys, against a first team offensive line or first team offense. And that, to me, and I know he didn't start last night, but that, to me, is what he's got to show up and do, because he's played. Look, he's come in off the bench against ones in practice, but he's not a starting outside backer, and that's. So I'm sorry. Last night he did technically start with Huff. That's actually their alignment as I look at it. He did start, but they've gotten a better look at him in training camp. And you're right, Nick. He is improving, but he's got to be more consistent. And the thing is, guys, we have to understand he's got a smaller frame. He put weight on his frame, but he's not a big frame guy, and that's what showed up against Baltimore. He got blocked pretty easily last week, not so much in this game.
Adam, in the secondary, James Bradbury has been trying to make that transition from outside corner to safety, and he got a little testy with the media after the game last night when they were asking him about it. It seems like, as Vic Fangio predicted, this transition from corner to safety is going to be a little more complicated than some people may have thought.
Yeah, and Josh, he did start in this game and at safety. And look, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. It was just the snaps that he had late in the game, late in his tenure playing in this game, he had a couple bad snaps, a couple bad plays. And see, I was laughing with someone this morning. If the Eagles thought that maybe they could get a conditional 7th-round pick for him, well, that kind of went out the door because, again, the other clubs could see this tape. They get access to it. They don't get access to practice tape or joint practice tape, but they could see this. And, you know, you don't want to make a super big deal about it because, yes, he had a couple plays that he'd like to have back. He's had a good training camp. It's been kind of a good story, and he did play a lot last night. He played 54% of the snaps. He played 30 snaps. They got a pretty good look at him, and he played 2 special team snaps, by the way. But, you know, overall, Josh, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens here because Gardner Johnson still isn't ready coming back from his shoulder. We don't know exactly when Sidney Brown's going to come back, so the safety depth is still an issue.
Adam Kaplan, Football and Forward, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, Inside the Birds on YouTube, at Kaplan NFL on the Twitter X platform, and don't forget about the Inside the Birds content on Patreon. Adam, great stuff today. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Josh Henning along with Nick Ershaw here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And, you know, Adam had a small window to get through there, Nick, but I want to hit on with you really quick. You know, one of the things we didn't get to talk to Adam about was this whole practice versus game thing. And, you know, you heard John McMullen mention it in the last hour, Nick, and you heard Adam kind of hint at it during the segment here about how the preseason is becoming less and less valuable.
Right.
And it's just such a letdown when you see, as Adam described it, all the starters as the backups. They're not even in pads on the sideline. And it's like, at some point, if these coaches and these teams don't value the preseason games, it's only a matter of time when the preseason eventually is no longer going to exist.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get rid of it at some point if you're not going to play any of the starters, or barely any of them at all. It's fascinating to see, like, the shift and the paradigm shift that has happened over the course of, I guess, like the past 10-ish years or so. Teams really don't want to play their starters during the preseason. It's very interesting to me. So, I think, you know, Sirianni talked about it after the game last night and said a big reason why they didn't play, he was making another excuse, was that, you know, they played a pretty hard practice the other day, 2 days before, and he was comparing it to, like, during the regular season. On Fridays is when they have, like, a light practice. You want to have a light practice before you head into a Sunday game. He said it was kind of a similar situation here. They had a strong practice and a tough practice against the Patriots on Tuesday. He didn't feel like he should play the starters 2 days later after having such a tough joint scrimmage.
And that's been a consistent message from Sirianni. Right. It was something that Doug Peterson said when he was here. It's something that Sean McVay says with the Rams. I know that Kyle Shanahan has said similar things over the years. Pete Carroll, when he was the coach in Seattle. A lot of these coaches in today's world value the joint practice more than the game.
Yeah, and we had Dave Klemick on Monday, and he kind of talked about it too, right? Like, you're getting a lot more reps in a practice, and the joint practices, you're showing much more than you would get in a preseason game.
Well, you're speaking of former players. I remember when Mike Gill had former NFL tight end Colin Thompson on a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And Colin himself said that he was like, look, as players, nobody likes playing in preseason games because he said we don't get paid for them.
Right.
You know, the players really don't get game checks, like real game checks, until the season starts. So it's like, to him, he said, look, if you had to tell the players you got to give up X, Y, Z and we get rid of the preseason, he's like, I don't think many guys are going to sweat that. And so it makes you wonder, Nick, are we going to eventually have a situation where when you go to Lincoln Financial Field in August to watch the Eagles play the Vikings, let's say, as they got a couple weeks, is that going to be a scrimmage or is it going to be a joint practice?
Right. For me, it's very interesting because game speed, I always feel like, is much more important than practice. Like, it's still practice, like these joint practices.
But the players claim they can simulate some of that game speed in the joint practices.
I guess you can, but we've seen over the past couple of years, it just feels like that a majority of the NFL has gotten off to such sluggish starts, and it's been ever since that these teams have taken the idea of not utilizing the preseason and playing their starters so they don't get hurt, and you think you can get more out of practice. It's been since then we've noticed a trend in the NFL where teams have really just gotten off to slow starts, and you're not seeing crisp football. You're seeing them kind of hash everything out during the regular season when they used to really hash it out and work out all the kinks and everything they needed to work out in the preseason games with their offenses and defenses, and try and learn what they were going to do heading into the season. So that's been kind of fascinating, and I think you're probably going to see the same type of thing happen again, right? You're probably going to see it happen again. These teams getting off to such slow starts.
Yeah, and I think we just got to get used to it. I think that's just the state of the game today. Players are not using players today, and I've heard this verbalized by different guys. The way the player enters training camp today is very different than they did years ago, because guys used to go to training camp to get in shape.
Right.
Now they go to camp and they have to be in shape in order to practice. And I think teams, they just don't see the value in ramping up like they used to. And I think that we as fans are going to have to adjust to whatever the league is doing moving forward. And I think it is what it is. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying I'm okay with it, but I'm just saying this is the world we live in now.
Yeah, this is just how it goes, right? They're very worried about, and we know it's all because they're worried about their top players getting hurt heading into the season. That's just what it is now. It's been taken to a whole new extreme, making the excuse, well, we can get more out of the practices, et cetera. You could still get something out of preseason football. You could. They just choose not to.
We'll get to more of your text messages a little bit later at 609-403-0973. I like the text from Matt in Sicklerville. We will get to his a little bit later. By the way, Matt from Cape May says if Nick Earnshaw is going to keep using modern day slang English, I'm going to stop listening to the show.
Listen, I don't like to use it. I'm not one who usually uses it a lot. But, I had to explain it to the audience out there as well as Josh. I'm helping you out. For real, I am actually an old man in a young man's body. That's just how it goes. I have very old school type of ways that I go about things. So it's I know the slang. I'm educating everyone on the slang.
Well, David in Violent is happy you educated him. He says, thanks for explaining Riz. I will buy you a beer. Sorry for the age joke. LOL.
No, it's all good. It's all
good. But
good.
what David did is he changed his sign off. Because now he's trying to be like Will. Will from Mays Landing, who works in Stern Harbor, who's currently in Avalon. David signs it as David the Millennial from Violent, currently in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So he's currently in Pennsylvania, but he's from Violent.
Right.
So he switched it up. I appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for texting in. It's a great job by you.
By the way, we did get a clarification from Tom from Margate. It's Happy Hour Friday. He gave us a clarification. He said Supersonic Tonic is a very uplifting tonic. Or it could be a gin tonic. Like a medicinal type of drink.
Okay. I got it now.
Although I still want to know from Tom and Margate, is he saying that I'm uplifting or that I'm medicinal? Because those are two different things.
They're two very different things. I'd say you're uplifting, Josh. I think you're being uplifting. I think you sound uplifting, okay?
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling for Mike Gill. Mike will be back on Monday's edition of the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. And of course, Mike will be back at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City for the football season. And they are the sponsors of today's Football at 4. The Gallery Bar Bookie Games is where you want to be this football season. Go to Ocean, go to the Gallery, go for the win. All football season long. For more information, visit theoceanac.com. Coming up next, a special edition of Nick's Nuggets. We're going to find out. I have a nugget for Nick Earnshaw. I'm breaking that live on the radio to you right now.
You are.
And because I just saw something as we were talking that I'm going to bring up on the other side. I want to bring it up first because I don't want you to beat me to this if this is on your list.
Okay. You go first then.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN.
We have the perfect.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Traffic. You come with me. The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Hello, with Nick Earnshaw, Josh Hiddick hanging out with you here on 97.3 ESPN. You know, Nick Earnshaw, today is a happy hour Friday.
It is.
We've been getting some good recommendations throughout the day. I bring up the happy hour Friday because when Mike Gill comes back next week for happy hour Friday, Mike Gill is going to take happy hour Friday back on the road. Did you know that?
Oh, he's back on the road. How about that?
He's back on the road. So for those who didn't hear, Mike Gill will be back out on the road celebrating 15 years of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And Bud Light wants to celebrate with you. Happy Hour Friday, August 23rd from 2 to 6 at Vagabond in EHT is where Mike Gill will be at next week. Happy Hour Friday in the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Next Friday, Vagabond in EHT is where the Sports Bash will be for Happy Hour Friday. It's Mike Gill in the Sports Bash celebrates 15 years. And for some reason, he still entrusts me with this show whenever he takes off.
Yeah, that's going to be a good time. So Vagabond's great. That's a great spot to be at. It's going to be fun for when he comes back.
So Nick's Nuggets, I'm confiscating the segment a little bit.
Oh, you're taking it over.
Yeah,
Josh's Nuggets today.
Well, no, not all my Nuggets, but I have a Nugget.
A Nugget.
So I saw this while we were talking with Adam Kaplan. I had to bring it up. So, as you know, the Olympics 2028 are going to be in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And Tyreek Hill has declared on the Twitter X platform, he's calling his shot and he's going to be on Team USA in 2028 on the track and field.
Wow, already he's saying he's going.
He's calling his shot, he says. Now.
Yeah.
Your thought, your reaction. Now, there's two questions I have for you. Number one, that's 4 years away.
Uh-huh.
Is there any concern that Tyreek Hill might no longer be as fast in 4 years as he is now?
100%. I mean, he's 30 years old right now. He is a 30-year-old player. In 4 years, he'll be 34 years old. I can do math, Josh. I don't know if he'll be the same speed he is right now. Usually when you turn 30, you might lose a little bit of a step. I'm just saying. Now, it's not to say he's going to be slow, but 34 years old, I mean, wide receivers in the NFL, we just talked about Julio Jones earlier. He's 35. I mean, you don't really see him anymore. He's a free agent. I don't think Tyreek Hill will drop off that fast, but it's always possible. That could happen, right? I mean, with someone his speed, he could get hurt. I don't know.
I mean, I'm just saying, I got some concerns if Tyreek Hill is trying to compete in 4 years, think he's the same speed.
And also, it's a different medium, too. It's flag football. You know, you don't have all the pads
Well, he didn't
on.
say flag football. He said track.
Whoa, back up. That's a different distinction. I thought you were talking about flag football.
No.
He wants to run no, then I'm out. No, then I'm totally out. I thought it was flag football he was tweeting.
Well, if it's flag football, I'd be in for it.
Yeah, and I thought that's what you meant.
No, he wants.
Hold up.
So for those who don't know, Tyreek Hill thinks he has been trying to challenge every Olympian for the last several years to races, and they won't race him. And including the most recent, who was the guy who won the 200 this year? The American. What's his name again?
The 200 meter? Oh, I can't remember his name.
Let me pull up his name.
So you're saying Tyreek Hill tweeted? Where's this tweet at?
Well, I saw someone else retweet it, but I believe his Twitter is @Cheetah.
Yeah, and he tweeted it?
He tweets a lot, man. It's you have to scroll through and find out. But someone screenshot him saying, "I'm calling my shot 2028 now."
Oh boy. So if he's trying to compete at track, no shot. Absolutely no shot. Oh, was it Noah Lyles?
Noah Lyles,
yeah.
Yes. So for those who don't know, he is trying to challenge Noah Lyles to race 100 meter, 200 meter, something. And apparently Noah Lyles hasn't gotten back to him. which not surprising. I mean, the guy literally went to the Olympics with COVID.
Yeah.
And he still won medals. So he might have taken some downtime. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I mean, 4 years from now, Tyreek Hill ain't going to be the same Tyreek Hill, man.
No, 4 years from now, now, if it's flag football, it's different. That's what I thought you meant at first. Like he was going to compete in flag football. Because I think he's mentioned that before.
He has mentioned it before.
Talked about it.
But I think what Tyreek Hill thinks is he's going to win medals in multiple sports.
Yeah, he's crazy. He's crazy. No shot. No shot.
Listen, he's not Carl Lewis.
No.
Okay?
If it was this Olympics, he might have a chance, okay, to compete. In 4 years, absolutely no way.
See, the problem the other problem is the only guy in recent years that I can think of who is a professional football player who tried the Olympic stuff was DK Metcalf. Remember he went to the U.S. trials and I think he finished, 14 out of 16 or something like that? So, he wasn't horrible, but,
It's a different medium.
Those guys train every day just for that.
Yeah, it's a different medium. Tyreek Hill's not gonna be on the U.S. team in track and field. It's just not gonna happen.
All right, what do you got for me?
All right, nugget number one. We got to switch gears, go back to the diamond. And I brought this up during Mike McGarry's segment today. Okay, Josh? Scott Kingery is a name that keeps getting floated out there. He's not on the 40-man roster. That's kind of the issue with Kingery. That's why it's hard to bring him up. And, you could run into some trouble if you have to send him back down, etc., right? I think the Phillies should bring him up because Cal Stevenson should never have been brought up, Josh. Never have been brought up by the Philadelphia Phillies, okay? I can't sit here and look at Scott Kingery's numbers. I mean, he's played really well all year. And remember, you had Whit Merrifield on this team who did nothing for you. Absolutely nothing. He was supposed to be your utility player, your super utility man, and he ended up getting cut, Josh. Scott Kingery is batting .278 this season. In the past 2 months, the month of July as well as the month of August, he has been mashing the baseball in AAA. Now, it doesn't always translate. I understand that. But Scott Kingery's played in the major leagues before. Has he been successful? Absolutely not. That's why he's in AAA. But in the month of July, he was batting .325. In the month of August right now, he's been batting .341, Josh. I think the Phillies, we're talking about them winning more games, getting back on track. They've hit the baseball very well lately. They have issues in the outfield, especially with Austin Hayes being hurt. I'm just saying, Scott Kingery being brought up for the stretch run, I don't think it would be such a bad idea, Josh. Your thoughts?
Well, I think he would be much better than Cal Stevenson because he's right-handed.
Right.
To me, Cal Stevenson is useless because he's left-handed.
I don't know why he was even brought up.
Because he's on the 40-man roster.
Well, yeah, that's why. That's the only reason he was brought up. But he's not going to add anything. Scotty Jetpacks, I'm just saying, you could go out there and bring him up. It's an idea. And Nitwit, who was on this team, did nothing. And he can play multiple positions. He can play second base. He can play shortstop. He can play the outfield.
Yeah, if you were to tell me that Kingery is going to come up and replace Stevenson on the team, I'm good with that.
Okay.
I can work with that. Now, as was pointed out earlier today, and we'll ask Frank Close more about this coming up in the next hour, when a guy is not on the 40-man roster, it's a bit of a thing to get him on there.
Yeah.
So, is it worth getting him on there just to have him come up for the month of September? What do you do? See, the reason why for me, I mentioned to you Buddy Kennedy as well earlier off the air, South Jersey's own Buddy Kennedy, by the way, is that Kennedy and Kingery can play multiple positions.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, when you get into the month of September, the whole value of the guys being called up was that those guys could play different positions. And so I like the idea of a Kingery or a Kennedy coming up because you're not pigeonholed into Stevenson to me is not, he shouldn't be on this team.
No. I can't find a reason why they would just call up him instead of one of these two. It doesn't make any sense.
Someone's got to have blackmail.
You think? I mean, the month of August though, Buddy Kennedy has struggled. He's batting $129.
Right. So that makes sense why he's not here.
Yeah, in the month of August, he struggled. He had a good month of June, or excuse me, a good month of July, but I don't know. I mean, Scotty Jetpacks has had a really good year. I mean, him and Buddy have had similar type of years, and they could do similar type of things. Scotty Jetpacks has been in the majors before.
Not successfully.
Yeah, but he was there longer. Buddy has too. Buddy's, had a cup of coffee.
He has, yeah.
But I think it would make more sense. Why not bring him up? Why bring up Cal Stevenson?
I don't know, man.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
I can work with you if you're telling me let's get rid of Cal Stevenson and let's bring in Scott Kingery. I can work with that.
Just try it. Just try it. I mean, but then you could have the idea of bringing up Marshawn as the third catcher, right? Like, you could do that too and have him come off the bench. That could be another option in the postseason. I'm just trying to think of matchups, potential situations you could run into in the postseason, and guys you may need to come off the bench, get a pinch hit, etc. I mean, these might be some guys to think about because you're kind of thin on the bench right now.
I can work with it. You got another nugget for me here?
All right, nugget number 2, staying with the Phillies. Now, I want to talk about Johan Rojas a little bit, Josh.
All right.
Rojas has been really good as of late. And, with Weston Wilson hitting for the cycle, he's been really good offensively the last couple games as well. You see the lineup tonight. You see how Weston Wilson hits against lefties. Is Brandon Marsh kind of being phased out of this lineup a little bit because of how bad he's been against lefties? Because Rojas, he's kind of been solid. He's kind of been steady since he came back from AAA. I mean, he's batting .242. He's got a fantastic glove. And he's been contributing offensively. And Weston Wilson has been hitting really good against lefties. He's batting over .400 against lefties this season in the major leagues. So where do you utilize Brandon Marsh right now?
So I don't think he's being phased out. But I do think the Phillies are realizing that Brandon Marsh, he's just not hitting left-handers. And I think that the Phillies have been hesitant to do this, but I think they need to embrace it and own it. They have two players in Stott and Marsh who are just not great against left-handed pitching. It just is what it is. So embrace the platoon. Own it, accept it, live with it. I think the organization really wanted Austin Hayes and Brandon Marsh to alternate in left field.
Well, the problem is Hayes is hurt.
And that's the problem. And so between that and the fact that before Hayes got hurt, they weren't getting the offensive production they wanted out of Rojas. That's why Marsh and Hayes were playing in the outfield together. I think that ultimately the team is better when Rojas is in center field. I think the team is better when he's in the lineup. I understand he doesn't hit very great. He's not the greatest hitter in the world. But you know what? You are paying a stupid amount of money to Schwarber, Turner, Castellanos, and Harper, and Realmuto to hit. It's not Rojas' job to pick up their slack.
Right. And that's obviously the ultimate thing here when it comes to the Phillies lineup. The top guys have to hit. And you've seen they've had 30 total hits in the past 2 games when those guys are hitting the baseball. It's just how it works, right? But Johan Rojas has been good in his last 15 games. He's had 39 at bats. He's batting .308, 12 base hits, okay? 4 RBIs as well, .372 on base percentage. He's been pretty consistent as of late. And if you're getting that kind of production out of Rojas, it's like, where do you put Brandon Marsh? If Weston Wilson's, going to be cooking out there in left field, hitting for the cycle and mashing left-handers, you got to leave him in the lineup. So right now, I guess it's kind of the platoon, Weston Wilson and Marsh. But every time you see a lefty out there, Marsh is going to be riding the bench.
And maybe he should.
Yeah, I get, and it's kind of, it's a little bit similar to the Stubbs thing, right? Because they're vibes guys. They're guys that are in the clubhouse. They're big voices in the clubhouse. They keep this team together. They keep everything loose and fun, right?
Yep.
That's the big reason Marsh, is still on this team. Because, I mean, you could have traded Marsh. I mean, theoretically, if you're looking at it just analytically, numbers-wise, what helps you become a better baseball team, you could have went out and added more in the outfield and traded Brandon Marsh. Brandon Marsh has value. But you stuck with him because you want to keep this clubhouse together. And, I'm finding difficult ways to have Marsh in the lineup, especially when he can't hit left-handers. And Rojas has such a good glove and has been really consistent lately. And Weston Wilson been mashing lefties.
More Nuggets from Nick Earnshaw coming up next. Also, Frank Closer, our Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, will join us in the next hour. And we still have text to get to. I see a plethora from Steve and EHT, as well as others at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Don't forget Frank Closer, Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, will join us coming up at 5:25 on the Sports Bash. He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. All right, Nick Earnshaw, what else you got for us today on the Nuggets?
All right, nugget number 3. We got a 3-pack for it. Well, actually, we have a 4-pack, right? Because you had a bonus nugget in there.
I did. I threw it extra in there. It's like when you go to the liquor store and they let you make your own pack.
Yes. So I want to talk about the Eagles a little bit, okay? And I want to talk about this quarterback so-called controversy, Josh. I'm getting tired of this, okay? My final nugget is we got to stop having quarterback controversies with the backup quarterback. As a fan base, as a Philadelphia Eagle fan base, the quarterback controversies have to stop because there's no reason for them, okay? They're just unnecessary at this point. Tanner McKee, I understand we fall in love with these preseason players every single year. There's always a 1 or 2 guys that people fell in love with that have no chance at the roster or making a significant impact all season long. So Tanner McKee, while he could be the long-term backup, I know Adam Kaplan did bring that point up at some point. Kenny Pickett is going to be the backup. There's just no doubt about it. Josh, we got to stop with the quarterback controversy thing. It's over. Don't talk about it. Stop it. I've just had enough of the conversation because I understand it. He didn't look great last night. This is the backup quarterback we're talking about here. It's not going to have a ton of meeting heading into the season, and I think it's just out of thin air at this point.
It's interesting because I feel like the people who want there to be a controversy are the same people who are just not happy with anything in life. They're complainers, right? It's like, you can't just be happy that your team is winning. You gotta complain about how they win. You gotta complain about when they win, where they win, how they win. And it's like, these people just like drama. They like to complain. They probably watch the Real Housewives of whatever that show is, right? Those shows on like Bravo.
Love Island.
Yeah, it's another one. These reality shows where it's like, they live for the drama. And it's like, I don't care for drama. To me, it's a simple equation what happened last night. Kenny Pickett had a bad offensive line against the first-team Patriots, and Tanner McKee was playing against backups. It's a simple equation. Someone was asking me today, Nick, can we play Tanner McKee in the same situation that Kenny Pickett did to see what happens? And the answer is that's such a complicated thing to ask. It's hard to ask a player to only play in a certain circumstance to satisfy the fans. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the drama. This is unnecessary drama because the Eagles really haven't given us much, right? Like to talk about during the preseason. And, Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee are the 2 guys who are kind of in a sense, battling out, and Tanner McKee has surprised over 2 straight preseasons. So people love seeing what they're seeing out of Tanner McKee because he's going against third-string players and backups. Kenny Pickett went up against the starting line of the New England Patriots yesterday with a backup offensive line.
Yeah, so, John McMullen said it that, Kenny Pickett was going against NFL starting players while Tanner McKee was going against guys who could be delivering for Amazon soon.
And it's not a knock. It's just what it is right now. Kenny Pickett has won games for the Pittsburgh Steelers in his career. He's a backup for a reason, but he's the backup. We can't get all upset for the backup quarterback. We can't create this controversy when there's no controversy. It's a backup. Who cares? I'm done. That's my final.
You good?
I'm good.
All right. I'm glad you got that off your chest.
I'm good. Me too.
Coming up on the other side, Matt from Sicklerville, Steve in EHT. We'll get to your text on the other side. Also, Frank Close, our Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, will join us at 5:25 tonight. And word has it on the street, Nick Earnshaw is going to fill in for game night tonight.
Yes, I am.
So Nick at night on game night.
Ooh, I like the ring of that. That sounds good.
Also, you'll be in with Billy Schwein tomorrow, I hear.
Tomorrow and Sunday.
You got a busy weekend,
man. It's a busy weekend, man. Look at this. It's going to be fun. A lot of radio for me.
I mean, you went to the concert on Wednesday. You're working all weekend on the radio. You're living the dream.
The grind doesn't stop, Joss. Never stops.
97.3 ESPN. More coming up next.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Along with Nick Earnshaw, I'm Josh Hennick, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. 5 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Key Acura of Atlantic City. For a great car buying experience, go see Rocco and the team at Key Acura of Atlantic City on Tilton Road in EHT, your small but friendly dealer. Check out their full inventory now at Key Acura of AtlanticCity.com. Don't forget Frank Close, our Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, will join us coming up in about 22 minutes from now. We've been talking a lot of Eagles, a lot of Phillies throughout the show, but Nick, I wanted to take this opportunity to try to catch up on some of the texts that we have not got to earlier in the show. It's been a wild show, honestly.
It has.
Happy Hour Friday, Eagles preseason game, Phillies win 2 games in a row, people losing their minds, people thinking Nick Earnshaw is too young to drink, people calling me, Supersonic Tonic?
Supersonic Tonic.
It's been an interesting day.
What a day. It's a Friday. It's a good day.
So, a lot to get to. Happy Hour Friday. Probably the best recommendation of the day was the Wildwood Haze.
Yes.
That Jeff in Ocean City gave us earlier in the show. So if you guys got a recommendation for the weekend, let us know. 609-403-0973. I'll give out some of my recommendations. Mike Gill, usually on a Happy Hour Friday, Nick, he gives out his recommendations. Well, I'm going to pull out my phone, my app, and give out my recommendations a little bit later this hour. But first, back to the text board. Matt in Sicklerville had a very interesting question earlier that I did not want to ignore, okay? He says, do you guys believe there's a real problem between the head coach and the quarterback? I'm hoping this has all been overblown. That being said, how bad of a start would it take to get Sirianni fired, especially considering how last season ended? Well, that's a 2-layered question. Matt in Sicklerville, it has been overblown. Because the reality is that if you read the Tim McManus article, if you listened Diana Rossini a couple weeks ago on the Scoop City podcast, if you've been listening to Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, or John McMullen from Jacob Media's Bird 365, they have all basically given you the answer. The problem, Matt in Sicklerville, is I understand that you may not be able to listen to 97.3 ESPN all day long, right? You have a job. You have a life, right? I understand that you may tune into other platforms when you are not in the area, or if Mike Gill is not on, or if I'm not on, and so on and so forth, right? I understand that there are other people out there who are basically vomiting takes on different platforms that are put out there to create clicks, to create likes, to create generating of arguments. The reality is that it has been overblown, because if there was ever a problem between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, I guarantee you Nick Sirianni would have been fired faster than you can spell Tyrannosaurus Rex. Okay? There is no way that the quarterback that Howie Roseman described as not wanting to pass up a potential generational quarterback like we did 10 years earlier, referring to the Eagles passing on Russell Wilson years ago, that Howie Roseman would ever choose Nick Sirianni over Jalen Hurts. The same Eagles organization, Nick, that told Doug Peterson, the only man to ever win a championship for the Eagles organization, you are no longer a head coach because you want Press Taylor to be the offensive coordinator. This organization don't care about the head coach. They care about the players. So if there was a problem between Sirianni and Hurts, there's no way Sirianni would be here.
Yeah, Sirianni wouldn't have been back. And, you know, there's the ESPN article that came out within recent weeks. It's just, they're not the same person. They're two totally different personalities, but they can coexist, right? Like you saw them riding around on the golf cart, what was it, the other day too. Right. So like, they can coexist. Like, you're not going to agree on every single thing here. And when it comes to Hurts and Sirianni, we know, like, Sirianni likes to wear his emotions on his sleeve. Hurts, more laid back. Like, they're just different personalities. These two went to a Super Bowl together. Like, they went to a championship game early on in Jalen Hurts' career and early on in Nick Sirianni's head coaching career. They've gone to the highest point you can go and just got so close to winning it. Like, they can coexist. They're like, I'm not saying that they're the perfect match for each other, but these are two individuals that have won a lot of games, that have been to the playoffs. They're not, you know, they don't have to be the perfect marriage, right? They don't have to be. But I think for the most part, I guess their relationship has gotten way overblown, like they absolutely hate each other. I don't think that's the case. And you make a great point. Sirianni wouldn't be here if that was the case. If Jalen Hurts really, really, really couldn't stand Nick Sirianni, I think Nick Sirianni wouldn't have been here, especially after the collapse of last season. So I think it's a little overblown. And always remember, winning cures everything. If this team comes out and wins a lot of games this year, they win double-digit games, people are really going to kind of forget this. And they make a deep playoff run, people are going to forget.
The other thing is, you know, I do believe Sirianni is on a warm seat. Not a hot seat, but a warm seat.
A little warm.
I think Mike McCarthy's seat is much hotter than Nick Sirianni's is.
It's like room temperature.
I think that Sirianni, it's like if you're one of those cars where you can, like, he's a seat warmer thing.
Yeah.
I hate those things, by the way.
They have low, they have high. It's on low.
Yeah, well, I know some people who have those, like, you know, you could turn, like, the seats hot in the winter and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I hate that. It's
why?
Like, it makes me sweat.
If it's cold out, I want to warm up, Josh.
Warm up the car. Warming up the seat is going to warm up the car.
It's going to warm you up. That's the whole point.
Every time I've sat in those things, they make me sweat.
But Nick Sirianni's on the room. It's room temperature. It's on low.
It's a room temperature seat because of the fact that, and maybe it's a little warmer than room temperature. I don't know. But my point is that I think that as long as the Eagles get to, as long as they get out of the first round of the playoffs, Sirianni is fine. I think this team has aspirations for a deep playoff run, obviously, with some of the moves they made. I think that what people don't understand about Sirianni is that the biggest reason why this team struggled last year was not actually just Sirianni. Remember what Jason Kelce used to say, it's the whole team?
Yeah.
It was the whole team.
Right.
So to me, I, Josh Hennig, here on 97.3 ESPN, along with Nick Earnshaw, filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash, I don't see it as a Sirianni problem as much as it is there are just some people who are not elite coaches. Not everyone can be Bill Walsh. Not everyone can be Andy Reid. Maybe Sirianni is just not one of the greatest coaches of all time, and he needs really good coordinators around him for him to be his best.
Yeah, and you've brought in Kellen Moore. You've brought in Vic Fangio. Totally did something different on the offensive side. Now you've realized, hey, maybe I should keep my toes a little bit more out of the offense and not be so hands-on as I was before, and let Kellen Moore do his thing and work with Jalen Hurts. Like, that's a sign of a good leader. And we've seen so many Philadelphia Eagles, including Jason Kelce and many others as well, say how much they really support Nick Sirianni and love him as a head coach. So I don't think, I think it's just been overblown to the max. I don't think these two hate each other. You're not going to get along with all your coworkers. You're just not. You don't love your coworkers sometimes, but sometimes you have to work together to achieve a goal. And I think this is kind of that case.
609-403-0973 is the text board. We got Dan from the Princeton in Avalon. Now, Nick Earnshaw was confused by this at first because we've had Will from Mays Landing who works in Sturt Harbor. We've had David from Vineland who is currently in Pennsylvania. So Nick Earnshaw didn't realize that the Princeton is actually a very popular bar and restaurant down in Avalon.
Now I gotta check it out.
Okay, so it's Dan who works at the Princeton in Avalon texting in.
See, at first I thought it was like Princeton, the school. Because the trend was on the text board for a little while, like saying where you were from, but where you actually were at the moment.
Correct.
So that's why I was like, oh, I'm a little confused here.
No, the Princeton is a famous establishment down in Avalon.
Okay, gotcha. So, thanks for clarifying that for me, Josh.
I'm sure that Billy Schweim has been there because he goes down there for the lifeguard races at some point.
True. Yes. Very
or maybe
true.
not. I don't know. Billy's been drinking a lot less lately, so we gotta give him credit.
He's trying to lose some weight.
He is trying to lose some weight. So he's cut back on the drinking.
Yeah.
So
here we go.
But Dan from the Princeton in Avalon chimes in at 609-403-0973 says, Hunter Renfrow I think would be a good get for the Eagles. You need a sure-handed check down receiver. Barkley will do that too, but Barkley will get a great matchup on a wheel route, and it would make a difference if you had another body out there. The problem with his explanation is you already have a sure-handed check down receiver. His name is Britton Covey. You don't have a legitimate backup for Smith and Brown if something happened to them. That's my concern, Nick Earnshaw. I think Britton Covey could very well be a slot receiver for this team and be like the third or fourth option or even the fifth option on different plays. I think the problem, I would say to Dan down in Avalon, is that Hunter Renfrow coming in here would be to potentially be a guy who comes in to play the outside if Smith or Brown went down. That's where his value is. I don't see him as necessary if everybody's healthy.
Yeah, I just don't love Covey being that guy. I just don't. Like, I love him as a punt returner. I think he's really developed as a return man for this team, and he's one of the top returners in the NFL, which is great. They need more. Britton Covey just doesn't do it for me, Josh. I'm sorry. I love Britton Covey. Don't get me wrong. But as the third receiver on this team, I just don't see it. I think Renfrow would make a lot of sense. He could play the slot if you need him to. He can make a block for you if need be. So Covey, he's not big enough for me. I understand where you're coming from there, but Covey's just not good enough. He just doesn't have the talent to be that guy after a Devontae Smith and an A.J. Brown. Paris Campbell hasn't really showed much either during the preseason.
Well, he hasn't been healthy.
Or camp. Well, yeah, that's another problem. Like, he's not been on the field. John Ross, not great. I think Renfrow would make a lot of sense. I think it is. I think it's something how he needs to go out and probably look at. Now, he's probably looking around the league to go out and find somebody, but Britton Covey just doesn't do it. Renfrow is much, much better than Britton Covey. It's not really close. Like, Covey's a great return guy, and he's great. If you want him as like your 4 or 5, fine. I'm cool with that, with where the Eagles are at and how many weapons they actually do have on offense. But you have to think about depth at some point with injuries, etc. But Covey is just not there. He's just not good enough, Josh. He's not that type of player. and, on this team, you want to try and fill that hole in, Renfroe would make a lot of sense and help you out in that sense with the slot receiver as well. You could place him outside, so you could get creative with him.
But again, it goes back to my question, why is he available?
It's got to be the money. It's got to be the money. It has to be. Because I can't see any other reason why nobody would take a flyer on Hunter Renfroe right now. I just don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, why else wouldn't you take a flyer on him? It makes no sense. He's 28 years old. It's not like he's an older player. He has value. I don't understand. I mean, he plays. It's not like he's injured all the time. He played in how many games last year? He played in 17 games last year. I'm just saying. It's an idea. It's an idea. But
guess what? I don't hate the idea. I'm just asking the questions that need to be asked. That's my role here at 97.3 ESPN. Sometimes I gotta be the bad guy.
Mr. Everything.
Okay, sometimes, you gotta embrace, how they say you gotta embrace the stink?
Yes.
I embrace the villain role.
You want to be the villain. You want to be like Joel Embiid's trying to be.
No. I'm not like Joel Embiid, because Joel Embiid cowers away from his role sometimes. Listen, I'm more like what Harvey Dent said. You either die a hero or you see yourself live long enough to become the villain.
So you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
I've been doing this radio thing for almost 18 years now.
There you go. Are you telling me I'm going to see myself become the villain at some point, Josh? Is that what you're telling me?
Listen, if everybody loves you, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
That's what my pop-up used to say. Okay? Right. David in Violin chimes in at 609-403-0973. He says, I wish Nick or Jillian would just say something like, we have had communication problems and we've worked on them, instead of these dumb generic answers that don't make sense half the time. It's funny David said that, because
funny you did say that.
Nick Earnshaw and I were having this conversation earlier today about how Nick Sirianni is like the greatest of all time at talking for 2-3 minutes and saying absolutely nothing. David in Violin is 100% right about this. Nick Sirianni is turning into a politician. The dude can talk and talk and talk and say absolutely nothing. He is just word salad at times. He is like if you look up the definition of word salad in the dictionary, there should be a picture of Nick Sirianni right there. Because he's right. There is a point where this organization just needs to just come out and admit. Just say it. Like, just own up to the fact that, hey, we've had some problems, but we've worked through them. Like, there's nothing wrong with just admitting.
And this city loves that. This fan base loves when you do stuff like that. I mean, Alec Boehm's the perfect example with the Phillies a couple years ago, right? He said, I hate this bleeping place.
Right.
And he came out and said, yeah, I said that. And then he got a standing ovation like the next night. You know what I mean? He owned up to it. That's why people love Alec Boehm. Don't dance around it. Anyone who comes and plays here or coaches here, just own up to it. Be real. Like, don't like play around with it. Dance around questions. Add your word salad. Say a whole lot of nothing when it comes to these questions, or say about one word, which Jalen Hurts does sometimes. He'll say about absolutely nothing, like in 3 words. He'll give 3-word answers. So, I mean, they both kind of do it in different styles. Like we talked about. They're 2 different people. They just have different styles of how they go about their business. Like, Nick will go on, and you really won't get anything out of him. But Jalen won't really say much. Like that. They're 2 different players. Or 2 different people, I should say. And Hurts, I think people do want to see him take more of a leadership role and own up to some of the things that happened last year. And then on the other flip side of things, Sirianni could be like, yeah, that, it's on me. And he kind of did do that to an extent. And, in that ESPN report, I mean, he went in front of the team and said, hey, it's on me. Like, I'm the head coach. And he owned up to it in a sense. So I think you've seen a little bit of it, but, just look as an overarching theme, Josh, if you're in this city and you're a coach or a player and something like that happens, own up to it, because it'll work out for you a majority of the time if you own up to it in the right fashion.
Let's flip it back over to the Phillies with Steve and EHT chiming in at 609-403-0973. We were talking earlier about Kingery and Stevenson and Weston Wilson. Mm-hmm. So Steve from EHT says, we're already taking at bats away from Weston Wilson. We don't need anyone else like a Kingery to come up and take at bats away from Weston Wilson. He goes on to say The trade deadline actually made us worse. Picking up Hayes pushed Marsh to center field. I think it's a downgrade from having Rojas in center field. The reason it's a downgrade is because Hayes isn't a special hitter at all, and Marsh, for some odd reason, isn't a very good center fielder. So a couple things there. Number one, I don't think Kingery takes the bats away from Weston Wilson. I think the only person keeping the bats away from Weston Wilson is the Phillies. Because there are times that you don't need Brandon Marsh to bat against lefties. And during that road trip, Nick, guess who was batting against lefties at times? It was Brandon Marsh. You're telling me Weston Wilson couldn't have played against Clayton Kershaw in LA? Of course he could have.
Right.
You know, I feel like the problem with the Weston Wilson thing is I think the organization falls in love with certain lineups and certain pairings. And I think the organization looked at Austin Hayes and said, he's a former All-Star. We want to get him in the lineup. And that's why Rojas went to the bench. I do agree with Steve in EHT. Having Rojas not in center is a downgrade. I agree 100%. But I don't think it's because Austin Hayes isn't good. I think it's because of the fact that the organization seems to fall in love with certain scenarios.
Right. And the Weston Wilson thing's interesting. Do we really think he's going to be this hot, like, for this long? I just don't. I don't think it's, in a sense, kind of what we were talking about with Britton Covey. Like, I don't think he's good enough. Like, he's having a great stretch, okay? That's great. He's he hit for the cycle last night. It's awesome. But, I mean, you have a problem when Weston Wilson started in left field. That's an overarching problem. They could have done more at the deadline. I agree with Steve there. This team, I don't know if it made them worse, but they didn't get much better. Now, Austin Hayes wasn't the answer. And you know, I've said this for weeks now. He was never the answer. Austin Hayes didn't really help you upgrade. You kind of just added to your problem in a way. Because he's more of a platoon type of player. He's a 250 hitter. The only thing he does better is he hits better against lefties. But then, on the other hand, they're going to instead make him a everyday left fielder and then platoon Marsh and Rojas in center. Well, now you have to think about when he gets back. Are you really going to take Rojas out of the lineup, who's been pretty good lately and has been pretty consistent? He's the best glove on the team probably. I mean, that's how good of a defender he is in center field. Are you going to take that out of the lineup? I don't get it, and it's just confusing. The outfield situation is just a little confusing because they brought in a guy like Austin Hayes, and they didn't go out and get a guy like Brent Rooker, who would have solidified left field. And they're kind of treating Austin Hayes as that type of guy where he solidifies, air quotes, left field. I just don't get that. To me, it was a confusing move. They didn't have to give up a ton to get him, but it just creates this weird kind of dynamic and platoon situation. It's like, what are you going to do with Brandon Marsh? What are you going to do with Johan Rojas? Do you want to take that glove out of the lineup? And the bat's been better as of late. So it's a confusing situation, especially when Hayes gets back. And if Wilson stays hot, I don't think he will. Let's be real. I don't think he's going to be hot for another few weeks like this. But you never know. It's just a confusing dynamic out there. That's all.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash Happy Hour Friday on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up next, our Phillies insider Frank Close from 97.3 ESPN.com joins us to get more into the Phillies. They're back in action tonight. They've won 2 straight. We'll get Frank's perspective on the Phillies. Frank and I talked on Tuesday before the Phillies started winning again. Is Frank convinced the Phillies are starting to get back on the right track? Find out next on 97.3 ESPN.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it. Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
5:28 here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig, Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Let's get to our Phillies conversation with Frank Close, our Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com about the Phillies. They've won a couple games in a row. They're finally getting the offense back on track. But is it against the Marlins? Is it against the Nationals? Or do we say the Phillies are beating who they should be beating? Frank Close joins us here on 97.3 ESPN. Frank, welcome back in. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. So, Frank, what do you say to the people who say, yeah, you won 2 straight, but you did against the Marlins and the Nationals?
Well, I think they're probably onto something, I guess. I mean, these are the games, of course, they're supposed to win. And a lot of the games that they haven't won lately were games they're supposed to win, I suppose. But, you know, I think this is a matter of the Phillies sort of remembering that they're good. I looking at the last week, there were plenty of times I just threw my hands in the air and saying, this does not make any sense whatsoever, right? So what I think ended up happening was, you saw a couple of the starting pitchers go down, then the bullpen gets overexposed. You have Jeff Hoffman in that 6th inning in Seattle. I think that's a perfect example of what happened to this Phillies team. He's coming in the 6th inning because they already used an inning of Orion Kerkering. They have to get through several more innings. And next thing you know, he blows up, gives up 4 runs, and on top of that, stays in to give up all 4 runs. You don't give him a quick hook because, you have to get through several more innings. So I think what happens is you saw some of this stuff compound. You got it into people's heads. They start pushing. Bryce Harper starts using different bats and taking off his batting gloves. A clear indication it got in their head. And, if the Phillies at least get used to winning when they're supposed to win, then I think they can come out of that. And then when they get past the Nationals and they got a lot of games against the Braves coming up. And, if they're used to winning, I'd rather them go see the Braves when they're feeling relaxed, when they're feeling like they still can hit, that they feel like they've got pitching behind them that can back them. And, it's, or even like last night 2 nights ago when, you see the starter gets roughed up and they hang in there and they come back and win, right? So at the beginning of that Tyler Phillips game, you had to wonder if they were going to win that day. So I think they just need to get used to winning, get out of their own heads. And I think this is a good time to do it since the Braves have many games coming up. And the Braves have their own issues too, of course.
Frank, Weston Wilson hits for the cycle last night. A big night for him at Citizens Bank Park. He's been really good against lefties since coming back up. What's his role look like, and what's the outlook for Weston Wilson heading into September, heading into October as of right now?
Well, let's think for a second about why he's there to begin with. The Phillies essentially decided that he would give them more than Whit Merrifield would. And the Phillies made the tough decision to cut a player. They were paying $8 million, and they gave the role to Weston Wilson. And kind of at the time, my reaction, at least on this airwaves, was, well, he'll play a few weeks, and maybe the Phillies will get a better bench bat to replace him. Ultimately, the Phillies decided he was good enough, or anybody they could have gotten was not as good as Weston Wilson. And so, he's got an interesting history. He was a draft pick of the Milwaukee Brewers, kind of did pretty well in their system. He, like a lot of other minor leaguers, missed a season due to COVID. So, you kind of didn't know where they stood. And Phillies grabbed him as a minor league free agent. And I think they did so because he had some minor league options available. And you like to have players you can send back and forth. But, he's a very versatile player. You might not realize it, but because he's really basically been an outfielder for the Phillies. But he's played the most at shortstop this year when you look at the Iron Pigs, so he can do a lot of things for you. Whit Merrifield was kind of that swing infield outfield guy and right-handed bat off the bench. And I think that role remains his. Austin Hayes comes back. Could he push some extra playing time? I think that's fair to say. They could put, I don't know that they want to per se, but Austin Hayes played a lot of center field for the Orioles the last several years. If you were really worried about offense against lefties, you could put them both in at the same time if you really, really wanted to. But, as Nick, I think you were saying a little while ago, or maybe it was in your update, you might expect him to regress a little bit. You don't expect Weston Wilson to do this all the time, but he's going to be your right-handed bat off the bench. He's going to be your fill-in the infield when you need it, and he's going to be your fill-in in the outfield. And take the take the heroics while you can, because a lot of really good teams have stories where someone fills in for a while, performs remarkably, and then goes back to their fill-in role.
Yeah, ride the hot hand while you can. Put them out there against lefties as much as possible. There's a lot of lefties this weekend. Josh and I have been talking about that as well. So hopefully Weston Wilson can keep it up offensively. But I do want to talk about one player in particular that's gotten a little bit of buzz, especially on social media, and that's Scott Kingery. They could bring him up. I mean, possibly. I mean, it's possible. He's had a really good year down in AAA, but he's not on the 40-man roster, Frank. What would the complications be for bringing him up to the major league level if they were to do something like that?
I think it's very clear they don't plan to do so.
Right.
They found a roster spot to bring up Max Lazer. They found a roster spot for Cal Stevenson. They decided Cal Stevenson was better than Scott Kingery when they made that decision. The thing that boggles my mind is, he finished that 6-year, $24 million deal, and they kept him in the system, even though they realized he had flamed out. So, I just don't understand why he's back in the system at all. Like, if you're not gonna use him, release him, let some other team pick him up, let him get a fresh start somewhere else. But really though, when you consider when the Phillies might need somebody, they're pretty deep into their depth right now. I mean, they just traded for Austin Hayes and then he goes out. They choose Cal Stevenson. Beyond that, if the Phillies need an infielder in a pinch, there were 3 on the 40-man roster, South Jersey's Buddy Kennedy among them. But you also have Cody Clemens and you also have Rodolfo Castro. Remember him? The Phillies traded for him last trade deadline. So they have people that can come up, to play the infield. I just don't think that he's somebody that they're going to give that chance to. Now, who knows? They could get 3-4 injuries deep and then they kind of are forced to, but I think it's almost more likely that someone trades for him this month, because you can still make trades for players not on a 40-man roster. And, maybe another team out there has had some injuries and they think, okay, who's out there we could trade for, not on a 40-man roster, that we give a shot to, and maybe he's it for somebody else. A couple years ago, the Phillies traded for Nick Vincent, a very memorable name, I know, but the Phillies made one of those trades as a way to get some extra bullpen depth in the month of August. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's one of those types that goes in a trade.
We're talking to Frank Closer, Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com. You catch him on Tuesdays on the Sports Bash, where he joins Mike Gill talking about the Phillies mailbag each and every week, which he writes over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Frank, you mentioned about the fact of the guys who they have caught up here. So I wanted to get your take on who do you think is going to be the guys that get called up in September? Because we know they go a couple different directions, right? Maybe they call Marchand to get some extra catching days, right? Maybe they call up, Buddy Kennedy, for example. There's different guys they could bring up here. Who do you expect them to call up when September rolls around?
Well, I think one's going to be Marchand, and the other is going to be Phillips. Because by then you'll have people that are healthy, and then you only get 2 spots now. I mean, this is a 28-man roster now. And so, for me, I think that by then, if you're assuming you have a healthy Spencer Turnbull, you have a healthy Ranger Suarez, well, you're really not going to have, you're going to squeeze the ones off the roster that you have right now. And so maybe by then Tyler Phillips isn't on the roster when you get a healthy Ranger Suarez and a healthy Spencer Turnbull. So then maybe he becomes the extra pitcher, and then Rafael Marchand, I fully expect to be back.
So if Marchand comes back, are we just expecting there to be fewer, more days off for JT Realmuto? Is that what we're expecting here?
Well, the third catchers, when rosters went to 40 and you could bring up anybody who was on your 40-man roster, almost every team had a third catcher. And it's really just because there's a lot of demand on the position, and, it can hit your body pretty hard. So I think what you want to do is what hasn't been the case the last couple of years, because the Phillies haven't necessarily brought up a third catcher in September the last couple of years. You need, and this is something I've been saying for years, you got to give JT more time off if you want to get the most out of him. I mean, he's old in baseball years, I suppose, especially for someone who's played that catching position so well for so long. He just had his hit his 10-year mark, which is very notable for a major league player because then you get the full pension. But how many catchers actually get to do that? Now, it's really not that many in Major League Baseball. And so he's got a lot of mileage on him. He had his first real injury this year that kept him out for some time for the Phillies. I think you want to keep him healthy as you get to the playoffs. So I think you want to give him more time off indeed. But I also think that Rafael Marchand kind of earned it with his call up. He showed he can do something with the bat. And you know what? Maybe you find yourself in a situation where you have the extra guy. You bring in Marchand as a pinch hitter, and then maybe after that, maybe Rojas comes in as the defensive, replacement for that spot in the lineup. So I think there'll be space for him, and maybe Garrett Stubbs pitches more, and you don't need him to back up the catcher so much. But yeah, I think Marchand has earned it. I think Marchand has a future on this team as the backup after this year. And as maybe someone who can play a little bit more in the future. So I think right now they're doing the right thing. They're getting him lots of at-bats at AAA, and then he'll be ready to join the team in September.
Frank, I want to talk to you about this notion of the 6-man rotation. Over the next couple of weeks when Ranger Suarez ultimately comes back, the Phillies don't love going with the 6-man rotation. Rob Thompson's talked about it, how he thinks it taxes the bullpen. He said that last night after the game. How long do you think they would go with an extra guy like a Tyler Phillips in the starting rotation?
All right. So the only way I can see that happening is if you get to the month of September, and let's be honest here. So Ranger Suarez is going to pitch another simulated game in the next couple days. And then he's going to have a rehab start after that. I mean, it might not be till September 1st that you see Ranger Suarez. Now you have an off day on September 2nd. You have an off day on September 12th. And so do you maybe with your, if indeed Phillips is your extra guy, maybe you just let him take a turn a couple times and you have the off days. It gives people the rest they want. But, I personally don't love it for the bullpen reason. If you have the extra arm, maybe you feel better about it. But yeah, if you are in normal circumstances having a 6-man rotation, that means you're taking that extra starter out of your bullpen. And then, as we saw, if a starter doesn't go long, there are days-long consequences to that. If you have to overuse your bullpen one day and let's say there's a day 6 of them have to pitch because the starter gets knocked out in the second or third. Well, if 6 of them pitch and of those 6, 3 of them pitched the day before, well, guess what? They're not coming out for a third day in a row. So you're going to be at a real disadvantage if you do that. Now, could it work if rosters expand and you have an extra starting pitcher available? You could, but I will caution one thing too: is Zach Wheeler does not like the extra rest. Even when historically he's been better on the normal 4 days rest. That's how he gets in his rhythm. So I would rather see Wheeler in his comfortable rhythm going into the playoffs than messing with that more. Because again, those 2 days off in that 10-day span. Well, you throw in an extra starter there, then all of a sudden maybe he's not on his normal 4 days rest. Maybe he gets on 6 days rest, and then it throws him off even more. So I'm not a fan of that. I think naturally for most of the starters, now certainly Taijuan Walker, Ranger Suarez, right? That those two are just coming off injuries where they had their time off to sort of pitch fewer innings, right? So I'd rather see them just kind of stick with it.
He's Frank Closer, our Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com. Phillies back in action tonight against another left-hander, although he's not very good, Corbin Burns. But still, Phillies versus a left-hander, Weston Wilson in the lineup. Phillies tonight, Phillies tomorrow. Against a lefty. They finally face a righty again on Sunday. Maybe by then Brandon Marsh will get squeezed back in the lineup. Frank, appreciate you jumping on today. Enjoy the weekend.
Who'd you say was starting?
He said Corbin Burns. I caught that too.
I was going to say.
Patrick Corbin.
Patrick Corbin.
Very different. And by the way, aren't the Phillies lucky they were not successful in signing Corbin to a long year?
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That's got to be one of the greatest misses of all time, right?
I would say so. They've been very, very lucky and they've taken it to him the last several years.
Yeah, I feel it's like Corbin Burns and then back in the day like Denny Nagel. Remember when Denny Nagel went to the Rockies?
Anybody that went to the Rockies was bad. Mike Hampton was bad,
he did
right?
Too, yeah.
That'll do it.
Now I'm making up for my mistake for overcompensating with my memory, baseball memory. So, Frank, appreciate you jumping on.
Have a good one, guys.
Josh Hennig, Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget the 5 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Key Acura of Atlantic City. For a great car buying experience, go see Rocco and the team at Key Acura of Atlantic City on Tilton Road in Egg Harbor Township. Your small but friendly dealer. Visit their full inventory online at KeyAcuraOfAtlanticCity.com. We'll check back on the text board one more time before we wrap up the Sports Bash. And then you got Nick at Night on game night tonight. Nick Earnshaw here on 97.3 ESPN will cover for me for 6 to 7 before he embarks on a long weekend where he's stuck with Billy Schweim in the locker room here on 97.3 ESPN.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Along with Nick Earnshaw, Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill. I've been here all week filling in for Mike. He'll be back in on Monday. I believe he already got back to the area from Virginia.
Oh, he's back already. How about that?
I knew he was on his way back this morning when him and I were talking.
Okay.
So I'm assuming he already made it back. I would think that, that's like a 6-hour drive, I believe.
I don't know, from Virginia? Yeah, probably about that, right?
6 or 7, I had to Google map it.
Along the lines of that. It's a long drive. It's
a long drive.
Stick with that.
But I'm sure Mike is happy to be back home and no longer in Virginia. Home sweet home, right?
Yes, of course. Of course.
Speaking of Mike Gill, so a couple of things I want to hit on really quick before we get out of here. Next Happy Hour Friday, Mike Gill and the Sports Bash will be live at Vagabonds in Egg Harbor Township. Thanks to Bud Light. They will be part of the celebrating 15 years of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. So that'll be next Happy Hour Friday, Nick Earnshaw. But today, Mike Gill is not here. So I am going to do my best bring up of some of the brews that I have had in recent weeks.
Okay.
To suggest to the people out there.
Here we go.
I finally got out to Myers Brewing Company down there on Route 9 in Ocean View. Okay, Myers Lighthouse Brewing. And there were a couple of brews that stood out to me. Number one was the Clubhouse. It's their Hazy IPA. It has a global rating of 3.88. What I liked about that brew was that it's your classic hazy, right? It's your classic go-to, this is a good brew, right? It had the right amount of juicy, the right amount of hops. It was really good. I also liked their beach ball they had over there. That's got a global rating of 3.89. I thought that was a classic pale ale, clean, crisp, good for a summer day kind of deal. Also in recent weeks, I've been down at Gusto Brewing down in North Cape May. They have a IPA session right now called Meep.
Meep.
It has a global rating of 4.03, so it must be really good. I thought this brew was incredibly delicious. I thought it was incredibly enjoyable, and I highly recommend it. Finally, Slack Tie Brewing Company, which is also down in Cape May County. That's on Route 9 as well in Dennis Township. I had their Salty Sailor recently. It is a sour traditional gosé. It has a global rating of 3.81 on Untapped. It's almost like the brewing version of a margarita. It's made with lime and sea salt, and it's the perfect summer brew. Nick, if you're the kind of guy who says, give me a Corona Light,
yeah,
you'll like this.
Oh, see, I would like that. See, I would enjoy that type of beer. That sounds really good. And sitting on the beach, oh, that sounds like fun.
I was just going to say as well, back in the day, I don't know if they still do it or not, but back in the day when like I was young and dumb, I used to go to Applebee's. We used to get like Corona-ritas. They would make margaritas with Corona.
Right.
This is similar but better version of that.
It's a better version of that. That sounds really good. I gotta try that at some point. You're gonna take me down there, Josh. I gotta try this.
Well, you're the one who's, I feel like you're almost more busy than I am at this point.
Possibly. Who knows? Who knows with my 8 million
I mean, between
job.
the community college, between going to concerts, you work with Billy Schwein this weekend.
Well, I only went to one concert. Just one, just this week. It was planned a while ago. This is the only concert I was able to go to.
I'm just saying, you're
in
a
while.
Busy man.
I am a busy man. I will attest to that. I am a busy man. So, and with Billy, those 2 hours, they'll feel like a full day. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. You're gonna have a busy weekend.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun. Tomorrow's gonna be fun. It'll be Clement M, myself, and Billy back in the studio all together. It's been a while since us three did a show together.
Yeah, it's gonna be like a throwback. What it used to be like Throwback Thursdays on social media.
I mean, since the early part of the year, but it's been a while since it was us three. It gets crazy when it's us three.
Now the question is there's two questions I have about tomorrow's show.
Okay.
Number one. Is Clement going to ask you if you're going to be back for workouts on Wednesday nights? That's my one question.
Oh, that's definitely going to happen. What's the over? What are the odds on that? Because he'll definitely ask me. On the air, yes, he will definitely ask me.
Oh, so
for sure.
You're going on the air.
Yeah, I'm going on the air. Not even off the air. On the air, he'll probably ask me.
Gotcha.
You going to be back for workouts this week? I mean, I've been working out. Listen, I've been consistent. Okay, Josh? I've been very consistent lately.
I'm going to go with a moderate favorite of maybe like minus 110.
Okay.
I don't think it's because there may be a possibility Clement gets more interested in talking about something else and forgets to ask you on the air.
Well, unless Billy wants to talk about, his diet that he's on or something like that.
Right. Well, then maybe it does slip in. Yeah. The other question is, are you going to confront Billy about what I had to deal with earlier today?
Yes, 1,000%. 1,000% I'm going to confront Billy. Tune in tomorrow, 10 a.m. That's going to be a fun one.
So that's like, what, like minus 300?
That's minus 700. How
wow.
about that? Yeah.
That's a strong odds there.
Maybe you want to be the dog. Who knows?
What's today? Tomorrow's the Negadelphian is on Billy Schwein show too, right?
PJ Quarter's on tomorrow.
All right. Coming up next, Nick at Night on Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig. Thank you all for listening the entire week as I filled in for Mike Gill. Have a great weekend, everybody.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat. Literally. But don't sweat it. Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.